He sent her a text at 7:14 p.m. on Christmas Eve that said, "Running late, don't wait up," and Elena Romano stood in the middle of their penthouse living room holding her phone with both hands, reading those 6 words 3 times like they might mean something different on the third pass. They didn't. She was 6 months pregnant. Her back had been aching since morning. She had spent 4 hours that day stringing lights on a 12-foot tree while the housekeeper kept offering to help, and Elena kept saying no, because decorating the tree was the one thing she had always done herself, the one thing that still felt like hers in a home that increasingly felt like a museum she happened to sleep in. Running late. Don't wait up. Vincent Romano, the man who had walked into a rival family's dinner 12 years ago, sat down uninvited at their table, eaten their food, and walked out owning 3 of their businesses before dessert, could not come home on Christmas Eve. She set the phone face down on the marble console table near the elevator and went back to the tree. She should have let it go. That was what a reasonable woman would have done. That was what she had been doing, in increments, for the past 2 years. Letting things go, adjusting her expectations downward, in small, careful steps so the drop never felt fatal. But she had found the scarf 3 weeks ago. Ivory silk, draped over the passenger seat of his town car when she had climbed in to surprise him for lunch. She had picked it up before the driver, Sal, could say anything, had held it, had registered the perfume, something heavy and expensive and completely foreign to her own vanity table, and then had set it back down and said nothing, because what was there to say in front of Sal, who had worked for the Romano family for 19 years and whose loyalty was paid, not given? She had said nothing to Vincent either. She had gone home and sat in the bathroom with the door locked for 45 minutes, and then had washed her face and made dinner and asked Vincent how his day had been, and he had said fine, the way he always said fine, the word landing like a door closing. The earring had appeared 10 days later. A diamond drop, single stone, found between the center console and the leather seat of his personal car. Not the town car, his car, the one he drove himself when he wanted privacy. Elena had found it when she was looking for her sunglasses. She had held it up to the light. It was not cheap. Whoever it belonged to had taste and the money to back it. She had put it in her coat pocket and said nothing. Now it was Christmas Eve, and her husband was somewhere in this city that he owned, and he was not here. Elena finished the last strand of lights on the tree and stepped back and looked at it. It was a beautiful tree. She had always been good at beautiful things that required patience and a tolerance for pain. That was, she supposed, why she had married Vincent Romano in the first place. She tried to sleep at 9. Couldn't. Lay on her side with a pillow wedged under her stomach. The baby had been restless all week, kicking with what felt like deliberate irritation, and stared at the ceiling and listened to the building settle around her. At 10:15 she got up. She didn't let herself think about what she was doing. Thinking too hard about it would have stopped her, and she was tired of stopping herself. She pulled on a coat over her pajamas, stepped into a pair of flat boots that took 3 tries to zip because her ankles were swollen, and took the private elevator down to the garage. Sal was not there. Of course he wasn't. It was Christmas Eve, and Vincent had given the household staff the night off. Considerate of him, she thought with a bitterness that surprised her with its sharpness. She found the keys to her own car, a black sedan that Vincent had chosen for her because it was safe and unobtrusive, and she drove out of the garage into the snow. She didn't know where she was going. That was what she told herself. She was just driving. Pregnant women did strange things, got cravings at midnight, drove to diners at odd hours. This was that. This was nothing. But her hands already knew the route. She had seen the reservation confirmation 2 weeks ago, purely by accident. She had picked up Vincent's phone to check the time when hers was charging, and the notification had been right there on his lock screen. Confirmation, La Marais, December 24th, 900 p.m. Party of 2. Table by the window, Mr. Romano. She had put the phone down and unplugged her own and checked the time on that one instead. La Marais was a waterfront restaurant in Lower Manhattan. It was the kind of place that required knowing someone to get a reservation in the first place, and required a great deal of someone's money after that. Elena had never been there with Vincent. In 12 years of marriage, through anniversary dinners and birthday celebrations and business meals she attended as decoration, he had never taken her there. She parked 2 blocks away, on a side street where her car would be invisible, and walked toward the restaurant in the snow. The cold hit her through her coat immediately, settling into her back where it had been aching all day, and she almost turned around twice. Almost. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows of La Marais, she could see the dining room, candlelit half empty now, at this hour on Christmas Eve. The kind of place that emptied slowly because the people who ate there had nowhere they needed to be. She could see white tablecloths and low flower arrangements and waiters who moved like they had been choreographed. She could see Vincent. He was sitting at the window table. He was wearing the charcoal suit she had hung in his closet last week, the one he had said was too formal, don't know when I'll wear that. And she had said, just keep it, it looks good on you. And he had kissed her forehead in that distracted way he had and left for work. He was wearing it now, at a table for two at La Marais, on Christmas Eve, with Bianca Moretti sitting across from him. Elena stood on the sidewalk in the snow in her pajamas and her flat boots with her 6-month belly, and she watched her husband pour wine into Bianca Moretti's glass. Bianca Moretti, who had been Vincent's consigliere for 4 years, who sat at the table during family meetings and spoke in that flat, precise voice that made everything sound like a verdict, who had looked at Elena every single time they had been in the same room with an expression that Elena had always read as professional indifference and was now reading as something else entirely. Vincent said something. Bianca laughed. Not the tight professional smile Elena had seen in meetings, actually laughed, tilting her head back slightly, and Vincent was smiling, and it was the smile Elena remembered from 12 years ago, the one that had made her feel, stupidly, like she was the only person in whatever room they were in. Elena's phone was in her coat pocket. She pulled it out. Her hands were shaking. From the cold, she told herself, just the cold. And she opened the camera and she photographed them through the window. Once, twice, a dozen times. She photographed Vincent's hand reaching across the table and Bianca's fingers meeting his halfway. She photographed the wine bottle between them, the candle between them, the small wrapped gift on the table that she could see had already been opened. She photographed all of it. Then she walked back to her car, sat down, and did not cry. She wanted to. She could feel it behind her sternum, the pressure of it, hot and enormous. But the baby kicked, hard, twice, and Elena put her hand flat on her stomach and breathed through her nose until the pressure receded, because this was not the place and this was not the time, and she could not afford to fall apart in a cold car on a side street in Lower Manhattan on Christmas Eve. She could not afford to fall apart at all. She drove home. Vincent came in at 2 a.m. She heard the elevator, heard his footsteps across the marble, heard him pause outside the bedroom door and then continue to his study. She lay in the dark with her eyes open and her phone on the pillow beside her, the photographs loaded, and she thought about the scarf and the earring and the reservation and the laugh, and she thought about 6 years she had spent learning to disappear inside this marriage, and she thought about the child inside her who was going to enter a world that she had not yet determined the shape of. She thought about all of it, and then she put her phone back on the nightstand, screen down, and lay very still, and began, for the first time, to make a plan. Her sister Vivian called at 9 the next morning. "Merry Christmas," Vivian said, and then, without pausing, "You sound like you didn't sleep." "I slept." "You slept for maybe 2 hours, I can hear it. What happened?" Elena was in the kitchen. Vincent was still in his study. She had heard movement at 6 a.m., had not gone to check on him. She stood at the counter with her coffee mug, decaf the compromised pregnancy had forced on her, and looked out at the snow covering the terrace. "I went out last night," she said. Silence on the other end. Vivian was 31, 4 years younger than Elena, and she was brilliant in the quiet, organized way that Elena had always envied. The kind of intelligence that did not announce itself, that simply solved things. She had a master's in financial forensics from Columbia and worked at a private investigative accounting firm that mostly handled fraud cases for corporations and wealthy individuals. She was also the one person Elena had never successfully lied to. "Okay," Vivian said carefully. "Where did you go?" "I drove to La Marais." Another silence, longer this time. "Elena." "He was there, with Bianca Moretti." She said it the same way she would have said the weather is bad today, flat and factual, because if she let the words have weight, they would crush her. "I have photographs." She heard Vivian breathe, heard her set something down. When she spoke again, her voice had changed, gone from sister to something sharper and more focused. "Are you safe right now?" "I'm in the kitchen." "That's not what I asked." "Yes, I'm safe." "Where is he?" "Study." "Okay." Vivian's voice was very controlled. Listen to me. Do not, I need you to hear this. Do not say anything to him yet. Not today. Can you do that? Yes? I'm serious, Elena. I know what your instinct is. I know you want to walk in there and throw the phone at his head. I'm not going to throw anything at anyone. Promise me. Vivian, promise. I promise, Elena said, and she meant it because she was already understanding, in the cold, steady way she had discovered last night in the front seat of her car, that throwing the phone at Vincent Romano's head would accomplish exactly nothing except warning him. Good, Vivian said. I'm coming over. It's Christmas. I don't care what day it is. I'm coming over. Vivian arrived at noon with Chinese food in paper bags and a laptop in a canvas tote, and the specific expression she wore when she was working a problem. Eyebrows slightly drawn, mouth a thin line, the look that had frightened several very expensive lawyers over the years. Vincent had emerged from his study at 11, freshly showered, carrying the particular composure of a man who had spent 20 years wearing it like armor. He had kissed Elena's cheek and said Merry Christmas, and asked if she wanted breakfast, and she had said she wasn't hungry, and he had nodded and poured himself coffee, and the whole exchange had lasted perhaps 90 seconds and felt like a decade. He had called Mia, the housekeeper, back in by noon to start dinner preparation, which meant the penthouse was no longer as private as Elena needed it to be. She steered Vivian into the small sitting room off the main hallway and closed the door. Show me the photos, Vivian said before her coat was even off. Elena showed her. Vivian went through them one by one, not speaking. Her face was completely still in a way that Elena recognized as controlled fury, not the explosive kind, but the cold architectural kind that Vivian had inherited from their father, who had been a man of measured responses and very long memories. Okay, Vivian said when she reached the last photo. How long do you think it's been going on? I don't know. At least since October. The scarf. Tell me about the scarf, Elena told her. Then the earring. Vivian listened with her elbows on her knees and her chin on her hands, not interrupting. He thought you didn't notice, Vivian said when Elena finished. He knows I notice things. He just thinks I'm too afraid to act on them. Vivian looked at her. Something shifted in her expression. Not quite pity, but close to it, and hard around the edges. Are you? She asked. Afraid? Elena thought about standing on the sidewalk in the snow, about the cold settling into her back, about the baby kicking while she sat in the dark car. I'm afraid of the right things, she said. Not of him. Vivian held her gaze for a moment. Then she nodded, once, like something had been confirmed. Then we need to move carefully, she said. Because if Vincent finds out you know, the first thing he does is lawyer up, move money, and put pressure on anyone who might help you. You need to be gone before he knows you're leaving. I know. And you need everything. Evidence, access, protection. The photos are a start, but they're not enough. What do you know about the financial structure of the family's legitimate operations? Elena set down her mug. More than he thinks I do. Vincent Romano had always believed that Elena was a beautiful woman who had limited interest in the mechanisms of power. She attended events. She managed the household with quiet efficiency. She was gracious in company and unobtrusive in meetings, and she asked no questions about the family's operations that were not directly relevant to her role as his wife. This was, Elena reflected now, one of the most useful misunderstandings of her life. She had spent 12 years listening, not obviously. She had learned very early that obvious listening made people in this world close their mouths and change the subject. But she had a memory that retained financial figures the way other people retained phone numbers, and she had sat at enough dinners and stood at enough doorways, and been overlooked in enough rooms to have assembled, over years, a picture of the Romano family's financial structure that was not complete, but was detailed enough to be dangerous. She knew about Harborview Properties. She knew about the restaurant group. 7 restaurants across Manhattan and Brooklyn, all legitimate on the surface, all running slightly more cash through their books than made arithmetic sense. She knew about Coastal Meridian Holdings, which was technically a real estate investment company, and was actually the most elegantly constructed money laundering mechanism Elena had ever been in a position to observe. She knew about the city councilman Vincent had been paying for 8 years. She knew about the 2 federal prosecutors whose campaigns he had funded through a web of shell donations. She knew about the union contracts that had been negotiated in rooms she had served coffee in, where the other side of the table had been incentivized to reach agreement. She had never written any of it down. Writing things down created evidence that could be found, but it was all there, in her memory, as precise and detailed as the inventory she ran on the household accounts every month. She told Vivian, "Not all of it. Not yet, not in one afternoon. But enough." Enough that Vivian stopped eating halfway through her lo mein and set the container down and stared at her sister with an expression that was somewhere between impressed and alarmed. "Elena, how long have you known this?" "Most of it? 5 or 6 years? And you never—" "No." "Why not?" Elena thought about it honestly. "Because I thought it would get better," she said. "Or I thought I would find a way to live with it. Or I was afraid of what knowing it made me if I didn't do anything with it." She paused. "Take your pick." Vivian was quiet for a moment. Outside the sitting room door, they could hear the distant sounds of Mia working in the kitchen, cabinet doors, running water, the ordinary domestic percussion of a household continuing to function. "You're not afraid of what knowing it makes you anymore?" Vivian said. "I'm afraid of what staying makes me," Elena said. "That's worse." Damien Cross called at 3 that afternoon. He called Elena's cell directly, which was unusual. Damien was the Romano family attorney, and his professional communications generally ran through official channels in ways that kept everyone appropriately separated. He had been practicing estate and corporate law for 30 years, and he had worked for the Romano family for 15 of them. And Elena had always suspected that he found the arrangement morally complex and financially non-negotiable. "Mrs. Romano," he said, "do you have a moment?" "I'm with my sister." "I understand." A pause. "There is something I think you should be made aware of, as a matter of professional obligation." Another pause, and she could hear in it the weight of what he was choosing to say against the weight of what he was choosing to risk by saying it. "I would prefer to discuss this in person, soon." Elena looked at Vivian. Vivian, who could read a room and a phone conversation with equal precision, raised her eyebrows. "Can you come tomorrow?" Elena said. "Yes, early would be better." 8 o'clock. "I'll be there," Damien said, and hung up. Vivian looked at her. "Who was that?" "Vincent's attorney." Vivian blinked. "Vincent's attorney just called you directly on Christmas Day to tell you something in private." "Yes. That's not nothing." "No," Elena said. "It's not." Damien Cross arrived at 5 minutes past 8 the next morning, before Vincent was awake. He was 63, silver-haired, impeccably turned out in a way that seemed almost performative in its precision, and he looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with the hour. He sat across from Elena and Vivian at the kitchen table. Vivian's presence seemed to unsettle him briefly, but he recovered and accepted the coffee Elena poured without comment. He put a thin folder on the table between them. "I want to be clear," he said, "that I am here as an individual, not as a representative of any client. What I'm about to tell you, I'm telling you as," he seemed to search for the word, "a person who has watched things develop that I cannot in conscience remain silent about." Elena's hands were flat on the table. "Go ahead." He opened the folder. Inside were 3 documents, photocopied, clearly taken in a hurry. The edges slightly skewed, one of them cut off at the bottom. "Over the past 4 months," Damien said, "Vincent has been quietly executing a series of financial and legal instruments, asset transfers, corporate restructuring filings, 3 separate trust amendments." He slid the first document toward her. "He has moved approximately $9 million from jointly held accounts into structures that are, legally, beyond your reach." Elena looked at the document. Her face did not change. "He has also," Damien continued, and his voice went carefully flat, the voice of someone delivering news from behind professional glass, "begun the process of filing paperwork that would, in the event of a divorce, significantly limit your claim to the Romano family's legitimate business holdings. This paperwork is not yet finalized, but it will be if you remain where you are without acting." The kitchen was very quiet. Outside the windows, the snow from Christmas was still on the terrace, slightly compressed now, gray at the edges. "How long?" Elena asked. "How long has this been in progress?" "Yes." Damien looked at his coffee cup. "The first transfers occurred in August." August, 5 months ago. Elena had been 4 months pregnant. She had spent August repainting the nursery, driving to appointments, eating the specific crackers that were the only thing that settled her stomach in the mornings. Was Bianca Moretti involved in structuring this? Vivian said, and her voice was the flat analytical voice of someone running an equation. Damien met her eyes. Not directly, but she was aware of it. There it was. Not just an affair, an operation. A coordinated, premeditated, multi-month campaign to dismantle Elena's position inside the Romano family before she had any reason to defend it, while she was pregnant with his child, while she was painting the nursery and eating crackers and decorating Christmas trees. Elena stood up. She walked to the window. She stood there with her back to both of them and looked at the compressed gray snow on the terrace and breathed very carefully, in and out, until the roaring in her ears receded. Damien, she said without turning around, I need to know one more thing. If I can tell you, I will. How many of the capos know? A long pause. 3, possibly 4, have been approached. Vincent has been, another careful pause, suggesting that changes in the family's management structure may be forthcoming, that a certain reorganization would benefit everyone's long-term interests. She turned around. He's been telling them I'm going to disappear. Damien's expression answered before he did. He's been suggesting, Damien said quietly, that the current arrangement is unlikely to continue. Elena looked at him, at this careful, tired man who had spent 15 years serving Vincent Romano and had driven here before 8 in the morning on the day after Christmas because he could not do it anymore without doing this first. Thank you, she said, for coming. He nodded. He gathered his folder. He stood and put on his coat with the methodical movements of a man who had made his choice and was done deliberating about it. At the door he paused. For what it's worth, he said, whatever you decide to do, I'd suggest doing it quickly. He left. Vivian was looking at Elena with the focused intensity she usually reserved for spreadsheets that didn't balance. 9 million, she said. That's what he said. And that's only what Damien knows about. Vivian pulled the copies toward her and started reading them with the speed and precision of someone who had spent a decade looking at fraudulent documents. Elena, this isn't just infidelity. He was already building the exit before you knew you needed one. I know. He thinks you have no moves. Elena sat back down at the table. The baby was still this morning, quiet in a way that felt somehow attentive, the way a person goes still when they sense something important is being decided around them. He's wrong, she said. Marco DeLuca called her cell at 11 that morning. Not from his own number, from a prepaid phone, the kind of thing she associated with Vincent's soldiers, and had never expected to see a number from on her own screen. But the voice was unmistakably his, careful, deep, with the slight South Brooklyn flatness he'd never fully shed despite 20 years working in circles that erased geography from people. I need to talk to you, he said. Marco DeLuca was 47, a former underboss who had stepped back from active family management 18 months ago, under circumstances that were described publicly as retirement and privately as something more complicated. Elena had always thought of him as the most human person in Vincent's orbit. Not good, exactly, but possessed of a specific kind of tired moral awareness that the other men around Vincent seemed to have long since bargained away. I know about Damien, Marco said. She didn't ask how. The Romano family had eyes on everything, including apparently their own attorney's movements on the day after Christmas. Then you know why I have nothing to say, she said. Not to Vincent. I know. His voice dropped. Elena, I need you to understand something. What's happening right now, the transfers, the documents. That's not the whole of it. There are 2 capos who've been told you're going to have an accident. The kitchen tilted slightly. She gripped the edge of the counter. Not now, he said quickly. Not immediately. Vincent needs the baby born first. He needs a legitimate heir on paper. But after, he stopped. I heard it 3 days ago. I didn't sleep since. She breathed. One breath, then another. Why are you telling me this? She said. A pause. Long enough that she thought the call had dropped. Because I have a daughter, he said finally. She's 9 years old, and I've been looking at her all week thinking, another pause. I've been in this life a long time, Elena. I've done things. But there's a line, and what's being planned is past it. She looked at the window, at the gray snow, at the city beyond it, indifferent and enormous. I need two things, she said. Tell me. Time and access. What kind of access? The secondary accounts, the ones Vincent runs outside the normal family structure. He has external storage, documents, digital records, offshore account information. I need to know where it is. Silence. Marco. I know where one of them is, he said slowly. A safety deposit box, downtown. He gave her the address, the name the box was registered under. The access procedure, which involved a specific code that he recited from memory in a voice that was very flat and very careful. That's Vincent's insurance against the family, against everyone. It's got records going back 15 years. I need more than records, Elena said. I need leverage over the corporations, the legitimate ones. Harborview, he said. Yes. Coastal Meridian. Yes. Another pause. Then, there's a holding structure above both of them. A parent company incorporated in Delaware, 48% of which is technically held in your name from a tax arrangement Vincent set up 6 years ago. He forgot about it, or he assumed you didn't know. Either way, if you exercise that stake properly, you have blocking power over any major transaction. Elena's breath stopped. Just for a moment. 48%. In her name. 6 years ago, while she had been sitting at dinners and standing at doorways and being overlooked in rooms. He forgot, she said. He thought it didn't matter, Marco said. He thought you wouldn't know what to do with it. She almost laughed. She didn't. Okay, she said. I need 1 more week. Can you keep this quiet for 1 week? I can try. After that, I can't guarantee how long before someone notices I called you. 1 week, she said. Thank you, Marco. Get out, he said simply. Get out and don't look back. He hung up. Vivian was standing in the kitchen doorway, having appeared at some point during the call without Elena noticing. She was holding a legal pad and a pen, which meant she had been taking notes. 48% of a Delaware holding company, Vivian said. Yes. And he forgot. Apparently. Vivian looked at the legal pad, then at Elena. Then she wrote something down, and Elena could see from across the room that what she wrote was begin. She had 6 days. 6 days before Vincent's suspicion, which she could already feel like a low-frequency vibration in the air between them, sharpened into something specific. 6 days before whoever Marco was afraid of noticed the wrong call had been made. 6 days to become a different person than the one Vincent Romano had spent 12 years comfortable being married to. She moved through those 6 days with a precision she hadn't known she possessed and had apparently spent 12 years accumulating. Vivian handled the financial architecture. She spent 48 hours cross-referencing everything Elena knew about the family's legitimate businesses against public incorporation records and tax filings, mapping the web of subsidiary relationships that Vincent had constructed over 2 decades. She identified 3 separate mechanisms through which Elena's 48% holding could be activated, each with a different legal implication and a different timeline. She drafted the documentation with Damien, who had apparently decided that having crossed one line he might as well commit, and who proved invaluable in translating the family's deliberately labyrinthine corporate structure into something that could be argued before a federal judge. Elena accessed the safety deposit box on the 2nd day. She went alone. Vivian had offered to come, but Elena had said no, because going alone was safer, and because she needed to do this specific thing herself, needed to be the one who stood in that downtown bank and opened that box and saw with her own eyes what 15 years of Vincent Romano's operations looked like when reduced to paper. It looked like a lot of paper. She photographed everything. She spent 2 hours in the box room, systematically documenting every page. Account numbers in the Cayman Islands, in Luxembourg. Shell company structures that spiraled outward like fractal patterns, each layer insulating the next from direct connection to the Romano name. Political contributions, not the traceable legal ones, the other kind. Cash and favors routed through intermediaries in ways that would take federal investigators months to unwind. Correspondence with 2 sitting judges, formal enough to be deniable, specific enough to be devastating if you knew what you were reading. She also found the divorce documents, pre-drafted, already signed by Vincent, waiting only for her signature on the opposing line. A settlement offer so insultingly small it had clearly been designed never to be accepted, merely to establish a paper trail of what he'd offered. Attached to them was a document she recognized as a psychological evaluation form, blank, from a private firm she did not recognize. The implication was clear and it landed in her chest like something physical. He had been planning to have her declared unfit. She photographed that too. She photographed all of it, loaded the images onto an encrypted drive that Vivian had provided, and then she replaced every document in the box exactly as she had found it and walked back out into the December cold and hailed a cab. In the cab, she was perfectly still and perfectly silent, and by the time she got home, she had decided something that she had not been entirely sure of before she walked into that bank. She was not going to let this man raise her son. On the fourth day, something almost went wrong. Vincent came home early. 3 o'clock, without warning, and Elena was in the sitting room with Vivian's laptop open on the coffee table and a sheaf of photocopied documents spread across the cushions beside her. She heard the elevator before she heard the warning from the lobby. A 10-second gap that was not enough time, but she had been running on adrenaline for 4 days, and her body reacted before her mind caught up. She swept the documents inside the laptop bag, pushed the bag behind the sofa cushions, and was standing at the kitchen counter with a glass of water by the time Vincent walked in. He looked at her. She looked at him. "You're home early," she said. He was watching her with the specific quality of attention that had made him dangerous in every room he had ever walked into. Not hostile, not warm, just present in a way that felt like pressure. "Didn't feel like being out," he said. "Hungry? I'll find something." He moved to the refrigerator, opened it, stood looking into it without visible purpose. "How are you feeling?" "Fine. The baby's been quiet today." He nodded, closed the refrigerator, stood there. "Vivian was here earlier?" he said. "She had been here until 2 hours ago." "Yes, she came by to drop off some things." Elena kept her voice level, kept her hands wrapped around the glass. "Christmas presents she didn't have room for in her bag last time." A pause that lasted perhaps 2 seconds longer than it should have. "Right," Vincent said. He looked at her once more, that flat, measuring look. And then he went to his study and closed the door. Elena stood at the counter until she heard the lock click. Then she reached behind the sofa cushions and pulled out the laptop bag and held it against her chest and breathed. 1 week, Marco had said. She had 2 days left. On the 5th day, Vivian made contact with a federal task force investigator. She didn't tell Elena before she did it. She told her after, and Elena's first reaction was fury, not at Vivian's judgment, but at her own instinct to control everything, which was apparently so ingrained that even now, even in the middle of the most rational decision Vivian could have made, Elena's first response was anger at being moved around. "I know you would have said no," Vivian said. "I would have said, we're not ready. We're as ready as we're going to get. The investigator's name is Patricia Fenn. She's been building a RICO case against the Romano family for 6 years. She doesn't have what we have. She doesn't know what we're giving her. She will. Elena, listen to me. You need institutional protection. Marco can't provide that. Damien can't provide that. The only thing that keeps Vincent from coming after you once he knows you're gone is the FBI standing between you and him." Elena sat with it. Sat with the word FBI and everything it meant in the context of the life she was leaving, the world she had moved through for 12 years, the people she had known who spoke about federal investigators, the way other people spoke about natural disasters, not as adversaries, but as forces. "Ben wants to meet," Vivian said. "When?" "Tomorrow morning, before you leave." Elena looked at her. "You've already set a date. Day after tomorrow. Safe house in Connecticut. It's Adrian Knox's—" "Who is Adrian Knox?" "Former Special Forces. He's done protective work for several witnesses coming out of organized crime situations. He's careful and he's effective, and Marco vouched for him, which I know is a strange thing to say given the circumstances. But Marco's the only one with reason to be honest with us right now." Elena rubbed the back of her neck. The baby was moving again, slow rolling movements that she had come to read as the difference between restless and simply present. This felt like simply present, like something paying quiet attention. "Day after tomorrow," she said. "Yes." "Vincent has a dinner tomorrow night. He'll be out until midnight." "I know. That's why it's day after tomorrow." Elena looked at the window, then at her sister. 12 years, she thought. 12 years of small, careful steps downward, each one invisible. until one night you drive to a waterfront restaurant in your pajamas and stand in the snow with a camera phone and understand that the bottom is not as far away as you thought. She thought about the pre-drafted divorce documents in the safety deposit box, the blank psychological evaluation form. A certain reorganization is unlikely to continue. The voice of a 9-year-old girl's father on a prepaid phone saying, "Get out." "Okay," she said. "Okay?" Okay, Elena said. "Day after tomorrow." She said it the way she had said "I do" 12 years ago, quietly, with full knowledge of what it cost, and with no intention whatsoever of going back on it. The night before she left, she walked through the penthouse alone. Vincent was at his dinner. The housekeeper had gone home. The building was quiet in the particular way that expensive buildings went quiet, a dense, climate-controlled silence that had always felt to Elena less like peace than like absence. She went room by room, not packing. She had decided to take almost nothing, only the essentials, because anything she took was something she'd have to account for, and anything she left would help preserve the appearance of normalcy for exactly as long as she needed it preserved. She walked through the living room, past the Christmas tree with its lights still on, still perfect, and thought about the 4 hours she had spent stringing those lights with her back aching, and she felt something complicated that was not quite grief but bordered it. She went to the nursery. It was still unfinished, the furniture assembled, the walls painted the soft greenish gray she had chosen in August, but the small details undone, the mobile not hung, the shelf of books not arranged. She stood in the doorway and looked at it for a long time. She thought about the child who was going to enter this world in approximately 10 weeks, and what that child deserved and did not deserve, and she let herself feel the full weight of that for the first time, standing in the doorway of an unfinished room in a penthouse that was about to stop being her home. Then she went to the bedroom, found the earring she had kept in her coat pocket, and placed it on Vincent's nightstand. Just the earring, nothing else. No note. Let him wonder how long she had known. Let him sit with that. She went to bed. She did not sleep, but she lay very still, and she was ready. She left at 6:47 in the morning, not because 6:47 meant anything. It was simply the moment she picked up the bag she had quietly assembled over the previous 48 hours. A single duffel, packed the night before while Vincent slept, containing 3 changes of clothes, her prenatal vitamins, the encrypted drive, a folder of the most critical photocopied documents, and her grandmother's watch, which was the only thing in the penthouse she could not have left without, and walked to the elevator and pressed the button and did not look back at the Christmas tree. The lobby was empty at that hour. The overnight doorman, a young man named Cesar, who had worked the Romano building for 8 months, and had the specific quality of not noticing that well-paid building staff developed early, held the door without comment. The cold hit her immediately, raw and damp, the kind of January cold that had no drama to it, just insistence. Vivian's car was at the corner. Elena got in. Neither of them spoke for the first 4 blocks. "You okay?" Vivian said finally. "Don't ask me that right now." Vivian nodded and drove. Patricia Fenn was not what Elena had expected. She had built an image in her mind over the previous 48 hours. Something bureaucratic, contained, the federal investigator as institutional entity. And the woman who opened the door of the Midtown office suite was none of those things. She was 51, stout, with reading glasses pushed up on her head, and the kind of direct, unsentimental gaze that came from spending 20 years in rooms where people lied to her professionally. She shook Elena's hand, looked at her stomach, said nothing about it. "Sit down," she said. "We have a lot to cover, and I'd rather do it before your husband wakes up." Elena sat. Vivian sat beside her. Fenn took the chair across the table and opened a folder without ceremony. "I've been building a RICO case against Vincent Romano for 6 years," she said. "I have financial records, 2 cooperating witnesses who are both terrified and nearly useless, and a money laundering trail that my supervisors have described as, quote, circumstantially strong and, quote, insufficient for indictment. What I don't have is a primary source with direct knowledge of the internal financial architecture." She looked at Elena over the folder. "Your sister tells me you might be that source." "My sister overstates things sometimes," Elena said. Fenn's expression did not change. "What would you call yourself?" Elena thought about the bank box. The 2 hours in the box room. The Cayman account numbers she had memorized while photographing them because the camera might fail but her memory wouldn't. A primary source with direct knowledge of the internal financial architecture, she said. Ben looked at her for a long moment. Then she picked up her pen. They talked for 2 hours. Elena laid it out in the same organized, unemotional way she had laid it out for Vivian. The corporations, the cash flows, the shell structures, the politicians, the judges. She watched Fenn's face as she spoke, and read it the way she read all faces, which was carefully and without sentiment, and what she saw there was controlled excitement, the kind a person suppressed because showing it would complicate the room. At the end of it, Fenn set her pen down. "The 48% holding," she said. "Yes." "You've already moved to exercise it?" Vivian filed the initial corporate notification yesterday morning. The companies will receive formal notice within 72 hours. By the time Vincent's lawyers identify what it means and respond, we'll have already frozen 3 transaction pipelines. Fenn looked at Vivian with an expression that was, for the first time, something like genuine surprise. "You did that in 4 days," she said. 5, Vivian said. "I'm a little slow." Fenn turned back to Elena. "You understand that once this moves, there's no walking it back. The moment those corporations receive notice, Vincent will know something has happened. How long before he connects it to you directly?" "Hours," Elena said. "Maybe less. And you're prepared for that." "I'm sitting in your office with a go bag and nowhere to go back to," Elena said. "What do you think?" Ben held her gaze. Something passed across her face that was not quite respect but was adjacent to it. "I think," Fenn said carefully, "that you've just handed me the case I've been building for 6 years." She paused. "I also think you should know that accepting federal cooperation means accepting federal protection protocols. Your movements will be monitored. Your communications will be monitored. You will be asked to testify, likely multiple times, over what may be a period of years. None of this is comfortable." "I'm familiar with uncomfortable," Elena said. "This is a different kind." "I know." Elena's hands were flat on the table. The baby rolled once, slowly, and settled. "I know exactly what I'm agreeing to. I'm still agreeing to it." Fenn looked at her for another long moment. Then she nodded, closed her folder, and reached for the phone on the table beside her. "Let me call Knox," she said. "Whoa." Adrian Knox arrived 20 minutes later. He was 38, broad through the shoulders, in a way that looked functional rather than displayed. And he had a stillness about him that Elena registered immediately as the kind of stillness that was trained into a person rather than born in them. The particular quality of someone who had learned to stop moving until moving was necessary. He shook her hand with a brief, dry grip and nodded at Vivian and sat down without being invited, which would have annoyed Elena under different circumstances, and somehow didn't. "Connecticut's safe house," he said. "Not a question." "Yes," Fenn said. "How long?" Fenn looked at Elena. "Weeks. Possibly longer, depending on how the corporate notifications land and how quickly Vincent moves on them." Knox looked at Elena directly. "Any known security at the Romano building who might have flagged your exit this morning?" "Cesar Vega. Overnight doorman. He held the door and said nothing." "Is he loyal to Romano or the building management?" "Building management, I think. He's only been there 8 months." Knox nodded, made a brief note on the small pad he'd produced from his jacket pocket. "Medical needs?" "Standard prenatal care. I'm at 26 weeks. I have a primary OB, but I'll need to transfer care. We have a doctor on call in Hartford who's handled protective custody situations before. She's good." He said it the way he said everything, with a factual brevity that made Elena feel, oddly, more settled rather than less. "Transportation will be in an unmarked vehicle. I drive. No stops. We leave within the hour if possible." Elena looked at Vivian. Vivian looked back at her, and for a moment what passed between them was not information, but something older than information. The specific wordless communication of 2 sisters who had been through enough together to have developed a private language of eyes and silences. "You can't come," Elena said. "I know." "Vivian." "I know, Elena." Vivian's voice was steady. "I have work to do here anyway. The corporate filings aren't going to manage themselves." She glanced at Fenn. "And I'll be in contact with the task force on the financial documentation." "So." Elena stood. Vivian stood. They hugged, briefly, fiercely. Elena's arms tight around her sister's shoulders in a way that acknowledged everything that could not be said in this room in front of these people. Don't do anything that gets you in a room with Vincent, Elena said into her sister's hair. He doesn't frighten me. He should. He should frighten you too, and it doesn't stop you. Vivian pulled back. Her eyes were dry, which cost her something. Elena could see what it cost. Go. Elena went. The drive to Connecticut took 2 hours and 40 minutes. Knox drove steadily, without conversation, which suited Elena exactly. She sat in the back seat with her duffel on her lap and watched New York recede through the window and tried to feel something clean and definitive about leaving it, and found instead that she felt nothing in particular, which was probably its own kind of answer. At the 40-minute mark, Knox said, without turning around, "You should try to sleep." "I can't sleep in cars." "You should try anyway. Next few days are going to be long." She looked at the back of his head, the set of his shoulders. "How many people have you moved out of situations like this?" A pause. "Enough." "Do they—" She stopped, started again. "Does it get easier, the leaving?" He was quiet for a moment. Not the silence of someone who didn't have an answer, but of someone deciding how honest to be. "The leaving is fine," he said finally. "It's the staying gone that's hard." She thought about that for the rest of the drive. Vincent Romano discovered his wife was gone at 8:23 in the morning. He knew because of the earring. He had come out of the study. He had slept on the study couch, which had become a semi-regular occurrence that neither he nor Elena had ever acknowledged or discussed, and gone to the bedroom to shower and change, and the earring was on his nightstand, single diamond drop, sitting in the center of the surface with a precision that was not accidental. He picked it up, stood looking at it, set it back down. He checked the closet. Her coat was gone. Her overnight bag, a small canvas duffel she'd owned since before they were married, was gone. He went to the bathroom. Her prenatal vitamins were gone from the shelf above the sink. He stood in the bathroom doorway for 11 seconds. He counted them not because he was the kind of person who counted seconds, but because he was the kind of person who counted everything, and 11 seconds was enough to understand what had happened and to decide, with the cold precision that had made him what he was, what came next. He called Sal first. "Find her," he said. Sal, to his credit, did not ask who. "Do you want her found, or do you want her—" "Found," Vincent said. "Just found, and call Reyes. I want eyes on the Hart woman, the sister." He hung up. He sat on the edge of the bed. He picked up the earring again and turned it between his fingers. She'd known about the earring for days, possibly weeks. She'd known and said nothing. She had looked at him across the dinner table and said nothing, had asked about his day and said nothing, had lain in the bed beside him and said nothing, and she had been waiting, not panicking, not confronting, waiting. He thought about that with something that was not quite respect and was not quite fear, and lived, comfortably, in the space between them. Then he called Bianca. Bianca Moretti answered on the second ring, which meant she'd been awake, which meant she'd heard. The Romano family's information network was not perfect, but it was fast, and news of the kind that traveled through it this morning. Corporate notification papers arriving before business hours, the Romano family's Delaware holding structure suddenly being formally contested by a 48% shareholder, traveled fast. "You know," he said. "I know about the corporate filings," she said. Her voice was even, precise, the voice he had been relying on for 4 years because it never changed. Register regardless of what it was delivering. I don't know how she found out about the Delaware company. That shouldn't have been accessible to her. Apparently it was. A pause. Vincent. The notification papers reference attorney of record as Damian Cross. He was quiet. Damian Cross, she said again, as if the repetition might land differently. Your attorney, who has been your attorney for 15 years and who apparently spent the day after Christmas. I heard you, Bianca. This is not a small thing. If he gave her the documents, if he gave her access to, I know what it means. His voice was flat. I'm handling it. Another pause. Longer. When she spoke again, her voice had changed in a way that was almost imperceptible, and which he registered anyway, the slight recalibration of someone reassessing the terrain. The 48% holding, she said. If she exercises it fully, she can't do it alone. She needs majority control to block transactions, and she's 8 points short. She's 8 points short if every other shareholder holds. If anyone flips, No one flips. Vincent. No one flips, he said again, harder this time. Get in front of every shareholder this morning, today, before the market opens. I don't care what you tell them. Tell them there's been an administrative error. Tell them there's a legal dispute in progress. Tell them whatever keeps them in place until I can get this contained. A beat. And Elena? He looked at the earring in his palm. I'll find her, he said. She had been in Connecticut for 6 hours when the first call came through on the encrypted phone Fen had given her. Not from Fen. From Vivian, using the secondary contact number they had established, her voice carrying the controlled urgency that Elena had learned to translate precisely. He's moving fast, Vivian said. Bianca's been on the phone with shareholders since 9 this morning. 3 of them have already said they're waiting for legal clarification before they take any position. That's expected. Fen said, There's something else. A pause that Elena read correctly as Vivian choosing her words because Knox was in the next room and she wasn't sure how much he was cleared for. Damien called me 20 minutes ago. 2 men came to his office. Elena's hand tightened on the phone. He's fine, Vivian said quickly. He's physically fine. They didn't touch him. They sat in his waiting room for 45 minutes and then left without speaking to anyone. But he understood the message. He's rattled, Elena. Is he going to hold? I think so. But he's frightened. He knew this was coming. Knowing something is coming and having 2 of Vincent's soldiers sit in your waiting room are different experiences, Vivian said, and her voice had something in it that was not criticism, but was honest, the specific honesty that sisters permitted themselves. Elena absorbed it. Tell him to move to the hotel, the one Fen designated. He doesn't go back to his office until this is resolved. He won't want to. Tell him what happens to the case if he loses his nerve. Tell him what happens to him if Vincent finds out what he gave us and he's not under protection. He'll go. Vivian was quiet for a moment. You're very calm right now. I'm not calm. I'm just making decisions. Same thing with you. Another pause. Marco called me too. He says Vincent sent Reyes to watch my building. Ricky Reyes. 42, enforcer. The kind of man who stood outside buildings and looked at nothing in particular and made the building feel smaller just by being near it. Elena knew him from a dozen family events where he had stood against walls and watched doorways, and she had served him food, and he had said thank you and looked at her like she was furniture. Don't go home, Elena said. I'm not planning to. I'm at the Columbia Library. I've been here since 8. Stay public, well-lit, cameras, people. Elena, I know. Vivian, I know you know. Stay anyway. A beat. I'll stay, Vivian said. You just take care of yourself. Eat something. After she hung up, Elena sat for a moment in the small bedroom of the Connecticut safe house. A converted colonial that Knox had explained was technically a private residence owned by a former colleague, nothing government, no paper trail connecting it to Fen, and looked at her hands in her lap and thought about Reyes outside Vivian's building. She thought about the $9 million in accounts she couldn't touch. She thought about the capos who had been told she was going to have an accident. She put her hand flat on her stomach, the baby pushed back against her palm, steady and insistent. I know, she said quietly. I know. Knox brought her food at 7 that evening without asking what she wanted. A container of soup from somewhere, and crackers, and a bottle of water. He set it on the table and stood in the kitchen doorway with his arms crossed and watched her not eat it. You need to eat, he said. I know. Not a suggestion. I heard you. She picked up the spoon. You were special forces. Yes. How long? 12 years. She ate a spoonful of soup. It was good, actually. Vegetable, something with beans, the kind of thing that tasted like someone had cooked it rather than assembled it. And then you did this. After a while, yes. Why? He was quiet for a moment in the way she was coming to recognize, not evasion, just the pause of someone who answered things exactly as precisely as they meant to, and no more. Seemed like work worth doing, he said. She looked at him. That's not a full answer. No, he agreed. It's not. She ate more soup. Outside the windows of the Colonial, the darkness was complete. The kind of darkness that didn't exist in Manhattan. No ambient orange, just actual dark. Fen called while you were on the phone earlier, Knox said. The shareholder situation is holding for now. But she got word through a contact that Reyes has been to 3 locations in the last 8 hours that connect to your support network. He went to Damien's office. Marco DeLuca's private residence, and one other location. He paused. The bank. Downtown. The one with the safety deposit boxes. Elena set her spoon down. He didn't access the box, Knox said quickly. He doesn't have the name or the code. He was photographed by branch security entering and speaking to a floor manager and leaving. But he was there, which means Vincent's people are working backward from somewhere. Someone told them about the box. Or Vincent remembered it himself. Is that possible? She thought about the volume of things Vincent had built over 20 years. The layers, the subsidiaries, the instruments, the arrangements. The 1,000-piece machine that required constant tending and produced, as a byproduct of its complexity, the occasional thing that slipped from active memory. Yes, she said, but not likely. He would have moved the contents years ago if he'd been thinking about it. She looked up. Someone told him. Knox's expression was neutral. Who knew about the box specifically? Marco told me about it. She kept her voice steady. And Damien knew, because he helped structure the account years ago. Damien is at the hotel. And Marco DeLuca's phone has gone dark, Knox said. As of 4 hours ago, no location, no contact. The soup was in front of her, still mostly full. The room was warm and smelled like old wood and whatever Knox had brought from wherever he'd gotten it, and outside it was completely dark. Marco had a daughter, years old. He had not slept in 3 days because of what he'd heard about Elena. Or he had slept very well, because he'd already told Vincent's people exactly what he'd told Elena, and the price of that information had been the guarantee that his daughter remained unremarkable and safe. She thought about his voice on the prepaid phone. Get out and don't look back. The flatness of it. The particular weight of a man saying the truest thing he was going to say in that conversation. She thought about this box and whether it had been moved yet, and whether the photographs on the encrypted drive were all she had left of its contents. It doesn't matter, she said. If Vincent finds the box and empties it, the physical documents are gone. But the drive has everything, and the corporate filings are already submitted. That doesn't unhappen regardless of what he does with the box. Knox was watching her with that trained, specific attention. You're not angry at Marco, he said. I understand Marco, she said. That's not the same thing. He looked at her for a moment longer. Then he said, eat the rest of the soup. She ate the rest of the soup. At 11 that night, Vincent called her cell. She had been expecting it. She had been expecting it all day, and she had been deciding all day whether to answer it, and when the phone lit up with his name, she found that the decision was already made, had been made probably since she placed the earring on his nightstand, and she answered it. Where are you? He said. Not a question. Vincent rarely asked questions when he could say things. Somewhere else, she said. Elena. His voice was the voice she had heard in hundreds of rooms over 12 years, controlled, weighted, the particular pressure of a man who had made people comply through sound alone, through the simple physics of his certainty. I need you to come home. I know you do. We can talk about whatever you think you found. I don't think I found anything. I know what I found. A pause. The line was clean, no static, and in that clarity she could hear him breathe. The documents, he said. Yes. Damien. Among other things. Another pause. Longer. You've been planning this, he said, and she could hear in it something she had never heard in his voice before, a specific texture of unsettledness that was not quite anger and not quite fear, and was maybe, she thought, the sensation of a man encountering the first thing in a long time that he had not planned for. Yes, she said. How long? Long enough. Elena. His voice shifted. Not softer. Vincent Romano did not do soft, but different, adjusted, moving from pressure to something that was trying to approximate reason. You're pregnant. You're 6 months pregnant, and you're somewhere out in... You need to be somewhere safe. Whatever you're angry about, whatever you think, I'm not angry, she said, and she meant it. That was the thing she needed him to understand, the thing that would frighten him most if he was capable of being frightened. Vincent, I'm not angry. I'm done. Silence. Come home, he said. No. The baby... The baby is fine. Is fine. I'm fine. I'm being taken care of. She paused. The Delaware holding notification was received by the companies this afternoon. By tomorrow morning, your attorney, whoever you find to replace Damien, will explain to you what that means for the transaction pipeline. By the end of the week, the individuals who fund your political relationships will be receiving documentation through channels I'd prefer not to specify. Another pause. You built a very complicated machine, Vincent. You just forgot to check who was watching while you built it. She could hear him breathing. Don't do this, he said. It was the closest thing to a plea she had ever heard from him. Not a full plea. Vincent Romano was constitutionally incapable of a full plea, but the leading edge of one, and it landed on her with less force than it would have 6 months ago, or 6 years ago, or the day she had stood on the sidewalk in the snow and photographed him with another woman through a restaurant window. I already did it, she said. Good night, Vincent. She ended the call, set the phone face down on the bed, put both hands on her stomach. The baby was still. Quiet in the deep way that felt, to Elena, not like absence, but like attention. Like something in there listening to the way the world was arranging itself around it. It's okay, she said. Not because she was certain of it, because she was choosing it, which was different, and which was the only kind of okay she had ever had access to. She lay down. She closed her eyes. In the next room she could hear Knox moving, the minimal sounds of someone who had learned to occupy space without imposing on it. A chair shifting, a drawer opening and closing, the small domestic percussion of a man doing his job in the dark. She slept. She was woken at 4 a.m. by Knox's hand on her shoulder, firm and brief, and she was awake before she was conscious, which told her something about the last week. Get up, he said. We need to move. She was sitting up before she answered. What happened? Fenn called. Vincent's people made a contact at the Stamford field office. Someone inside, not Fenn's unit, a different desk, was approached. We don't know yet what was offered or what was given, but staying here past dawn is a risk Fenn doesn't want to take. Elena was already reaching for her duffel. Her boots were on the floor where she'd left them, and she pulled them on in the dark, the zip catching on the second one the same as always, and she stood up. Where are we going? She said. Knox was already at the door. He looked back at her in the dim light from the hallway, and his face was what it always was, composed, attentive, already solving the problem ahead of them instead of the one behind. Somewhere he won't think to look, he said. She picked up her bag. Her phone. The encrypted drive, which she checked the pocket for twice, and then a third time because some habits came from fear and some came from sense, and she was no longer interested in telling them apart. She followed Knox into the hallway, into the dark, into whatever came next. They drove for 90 minutes before Knox said where they were going. Not because he was being secretive. Elena had already understood that Knox withheld information in sequence, releasing it only when it became operationally necessary, the way a careful person releases weight from one hand before picking it up with the other. He drove north and slightly west, off the interstate and onto state roads that moved through the kind of small Connecticut towns that existed in the spaces between other places. And at some point past 5 in the morning, the sky ahead of them went from black to a dark bruised blue that was not yet dawn, but was the thing that preceded it. Torrington, he said, a colleague's place. She doesn't use it in winter. She know we're coming? She knows someone might be coming. She doesn't know who. Elena looked out at the dark road. Her back had begun aching again in the car. It ached in cars, in chairs, anywhere that required her to sit still for more than 20 minutes. And she shifted against the seat and pressed her hand to the lower left side where the pain was sharpest. You need to stop, Knox said. He had eyes on the road, but he registered everything. She had noticed that about him. The peripheral attention, the way nothing in his immediate environment went unprocessed. No, keep going. We can stop. Knox, keep going. He kept going. The house in Torrington was a narrow 2-story colonial on a dead-end road, surrounded by trees that in summer would have been dense cover, and in January were bare enough to see through, which Knox pointed out when they arrived, stood on the porch for a moment, looking at the tree line, doing whatever calculation he did when he assessed a location. We're visible from the road in winter, he said. We stay off the porch. Understood. Inside it was cold. The heat had been set to minimum, just enough to protect the pipes, and it smelled like a closed house, like stored air in old wood and the particular stillness of a place that had not been breathed in for months. Knox went through the rooms first, which Elena stood in the hallway and watched him do without comment, and then he turned the heat up and showed her where the bedroom was and told her to sleep. "It's almost 5:30, she said, "and you've been awake since 4 and you're 26 weeks pregnant. Sleep." She slept. She woke to her phone. Not the encrypted Fen phone, her personal cell, which she had kept because disabling it entirely would have flagged as significant to anyone monitoring Vincent's network, and which she had been managing carefully, keeping it powered and present while conducting all real communications through the encrypted line. It was Vivian. 7:43 in the morning. "Fen's pulling back," Vivian said. The controlled urgency from the night before had been replaced by something rawer, less managed. "She called me 20 minutes ago. She said the contact at the Stamford office, the one who was approached, gave up the Connecticut location. Not the Torrington address, but enough of the county to make a search viable. She says she's reassigning resources." Elena sat up. "Reassigning to what?" "She didn't say. Elena, she's backing away from the direct protection arrangement. She's saying the task force needs to preserve operational security, and having her unit directly tied to your location is a liability right now." Elena was quiet. "She's not abandoning the case," Vivian said, and there was a specific quality in her voice that Elena recognized as Vivian trying to believe what she was saying while she said it. "She said the evidence is still actionable. The corporate filings are still in motion. It's just the direct protection is being reconfigured." "Reconfigured into what?" A pause. "She said Knox is cleared to continue as primary protection, that the arrangement with him holds regardless. So the FBI is stepping back and leaving me with one man in a house in Torrington. For now," she said, "for now, Elena. It's—" Vivian stopped. When she started again, her voice was stripped of the management she usually kept on it. "I'm sorry. I thought she would hold. I thought once we gave her the case, she would—" "Don't," Elena said. "Don't apologize. You did everything right." "It doesn't feel like everything right." "It never does." Elena stood up, moved to the window, kept herself back from it the way Knox had told her to. The trees in the backyard were bare and still. "Where are you?" "Still at the hotel Fen designated. She said I'm safe there for now." "Stay there. Stay there. Don't move for any reason except Fen directly calling you on the encrypted line." "I will." A pause. "What are you going to do?" Elena thought about the encrypted drive in her bag. The corporate filings already submitted. The 48% stake already formally exercised. The Cayman account numbers she had memorized in that bank box room. "What I've been doing," she said. "Keep moving." She told Knox over coffee. He listened without interrupting, standing at the kitchen counter with his mug held in both hands. And when she finished, he was quiet for a moment. That was not indecision, but calculation. "Fen's exposure became a problem," he said. "Or someone made it a problem." He looked at her. "You think the contact at the Stamford office wasn't incidental?" "I think Vincent has been paying people in federal buildings for 20 years. I photographed the documentation of at least 4 of them." She set her mug down. "I think someone in Fen's extended network received a communication from someone in Vincent's network, and the result is that the institutional protection I spent 5 days building just evaporated at 4 in the morning." Knox was quiet again. "You're still here," she said. "Yes." "Why?" "If Fen's officially reconfigured the arrangement with Fen was always secondary," he said. "I took this because someone I trust asked me to. That doesn't change because Fen reconfigures." She looked at him. "Marco asked you." Something shifted in his face very slightly. "Marco DeLuca called me 3 days before you left the penthouse. He said there was a woman who was going to need to get out, and he said she was carrying a child, and he said whoever helped her needed to understand what they were getting into." Elena absorbed this. Marco, who had gone dark. Marco, whose phone had stopped transmitting. Marco, who had given her the box and the address and the 48% holding and had then, possibly, told Vincent where the box was. "Did you know him well?" she said. "Marco." "Long enough." Knox looked at his coffee. "He's complicated. He might have sold us out." "He might have," Knox agreed. "He also might be dead." The word landed in the kitchen the way those words do. Not loudly, just with weight, The specific gravity of a thing said plainly. She thought about Marco's daughter, 9 years old. The voice on the prepaid phone, "I have a daughter." She thought about what it cost a man to make that call, and what it might have cost him afterward. And she found that she could not settle on a clear answer about what Marco had done or not done, and she was not sure she would ever have one. "Okay," she said. "What's next?" "We stay here through today. I have a contact in Albany, not federal, private, someone I've worked with before, who can provide a secondary safe location. I'll reach out this morning. We move tonight if possible." "And the case?" "The case doesn't need you in a federal building to move forward. The filings are submitted. The evidence is on the drive. Fen wants the indictment. She hasn't walked away from the case, just from the liability of your physical proximity to her unit. The corporate action is still happening whether you're in federal custody or not." Elena nodded. She picked up her coffee. It was too hot, and she drank it anyway. "There's one more thing," Knox said. He said it in the voice that she had begun to recognize as the one he used when the next sentence was going to be difficult, not softened, just preceded by a specific quality of steadiness, like bracing without visibly bracing. "Reyes was in Torrington this morning." She set the mug down. "Not this street," Knox said quickly. "Torrington generally. He was photographed at a gas station 2 miles from here at 6:15 a.m. by a traffic camera. Fenn's contact forwarded the image before the reconfiguration." He paused. "He doesn't have this address, but he has the town. How?" "I don't know yet." "Knox." "I don't know yet," he said again, and his voice was exactly the same as before, which was steadying and also, under the circumstances, more frightening than uncertainty would have been. It might be the cell tower data from your personal phone. It might be something through Marco. It might be a coincidence. Reyes covers territory. He might be canvassing the whole county. "It's not a coincidence." "No," he said. "Probably not." She looked at the window, the trees, the gray January sky settling in above them. "How long do we have?" she said. "If he's canvassing, hours. If he has something more specific, less." She stood up. "Then we don't wait until tonight." "What?" They were packed and in the car within 20 minutes. Elena had learned over the past week to compress her needs to what fit in one bag and could be lifted in under 10 seconds, and she did it now with the automatic efficiency of someone who had internalized a new set of rules for existing. Knox swept the house, wiped surfaces, checked windows, the practiced erasure of presence, and they were on the road by 9:15. Knox drove north. He was on the phone for the first 30 minutes, brief exchanges she didn't try to parse, names she didn't know, addresses delivered in partial segments as if even in a private car, he was operating under the assumption that any channel could be compromised. She sat in the back and watched the Connecticut landscape move past and felt the baby move. A long, slow pressure on her right side that had become familiar enough to read, active and present, and somehow, in its own blind physical way, patient. Her personal cell buzzed. Unknown number. She looked at Knox in the mirror. He glanced back. "Answer it," he said. "Keep them talking." She answered. "Mrs. Romano." A man's voice. Not Reyes. Someone smoother, administrative, the voice of someone who delivered messages rather than carried them. "Mr. Romano would like to speak with you." Mr. Romano can call this number directly. He'd prefer a less monitored channel. He's asking you to call the number I'm about to give you, from whatever location you're currently in, within the next 20 minutes. He says, a brief pause, the pause of someone reading from a note. He says he has information regarding your sister that you should hear before you make any further decisions. The car was very quiet. Knox was watching the road, both hands on the wheel, his posture unchanged. "Say that again," she said. "He has information regarding your sister, Vivian Hart. He'd like to share it with you personally, on a private line, within the next 20 minutes. Elena ended the call. She looked at Knox. "Fenn's hotel." "I heard." He was already reaching for his phone, already dialing. He put it on speaker and held it between them, and they listened to it ring. Once, twice, 4 times. Fenn's voicemail. He tried the secondary contact number for the hotel. A front desk voice answered. Indifferent, professional, stated the name of the hotel. "Room 412, Knox said. A pause. The soft percussion of a keyboard. I'm sorry, sir. That room was vacated this morning. Knox looked at Elena in the mirror. When? He said. I'm sorry, I can't give out. Approximately when? A longer pause. Early, before we'd normally process a checkout. Around 6 a.m. Knox ended the call. Elena's phone was in her hand. She was dialing Vivian's encrypted line before Knox could say anything, and she held the phone to her ear, and it rang and went to the voicemail that Fenn's tech people had set up, a generic recording with no name, no identifying information. She dialed Vivian's personal cell. Straight to voicemail. She dialed the Columbia University Library's main number, which she knew by memory because Vivian had worked there 3 afternoons a week for 4 years, and Elena had called that desk more times than she could count. The librarian who answered told her that the reading room was open, but that she hadn't personally seen the woman Elena described that morning. Elena ended the call. She sat in the back of Knox's car on a state road in northern Connecticut, with her phone in both hands and her 26-week stomach pressing against her thighs, and she understood, with a clarity that was cold and total and completely devoid of anything like panic, that something had gone wrong in a way that was not recoverable by the tools she currently had. He has her, she said. Knox said nothing. He has Vivian, she said. That's what the call was. We don't know that, Knox said, and his voice had the quality of a man stating the technically accurate thing while both of them understood what it meant. We know she vacated the hotel at 6 a.m. and her phones are dark. That's what we know. Knox. He was quiet. He has her, she said. He pulled off the road 20 minutes later, into the parking lot of a closed garden center, bare wire racks and stacked plastic pots, and a hand-painted sign advertising spring hours. And he parked and turned the engine off and turned around in the seat to look at her directly for the first time since they'd left Torrington. Talk to me, he said. She was holding the phone. She realized her hands were tight around it, too tight, and she consciously loosened them. He took Vivian to get me to call him, she said. Her voice was steady. She was making it steady. He knows the corporate filings are already submitted, and he knows he can't unsubmit them. He knows the evidence on the drive exists. He can't stop the case from moving forward by going after the physical documents anymore. She breathed. So he's going after the one thing I can't replace. Knox was watching her. The call said 20 minutes, she said. It's been 11. You're not calling him. I have to call him. Elena, he has my sister. She looked at him. Directly, no deflection, the way she'd been looking at Knox since the first morning, which was the only way she knew how to do things anymore. He has Vivian, and she is the only other person in this entire situation who did everything right. She did everything I asked her to do, and she did it better than I could have done it, and she's sitting somewhere right now because of me. Knox held her gaze. His face was controlled, but his eyes had something in them that was not the trained detachment she'd been reading since they met. Something that was considering her as a person rather than as a principle to be managed. If you call him on that number, he said carefully, you give him whatever data he can pull from the connection, location, carrier, device information. It's not definitive, but it narrows the search. I know. And the moment you call him, the dynamic shifts. He's been reacting since you left. The second you make contact on his terms, he stops reacting. I know that too. So tell me, Knox said, what do you want to do? She thought about Vivian on the phone on Christmas morning. Are you safe right now? The question that was really, are you going to do what I'm afraid you're going to do? She thought about Vivian in that midtown office suite, sitting beside her while she laid 12 years of her marriage's financial architecture in front of a federal investigator. She thought about Vivian's legal pad. Begin. I want to call him, she said, and I want you to be ready to move the second I hang up because he'll be tracking this device the moment the call connects. Knox was quiet for 3 seconds. Then he started the car. Call him, he said. She dialed the number the smooth-voiced man had given her. It rang once. Vincent answered. Elena. And there it was, the voice she had been married to, the voice that had said her name across 12 years of rooms and tables and beds, and what she heard in it now was something she had never heard before, a high tension, like a cable pulled to the edge of its tolerance. Where is she? Elena said. She's fine, Where is she? A pause. Somewhere comfortable. She's not hurt. That's entirely dependent on... Don't, Elena said. Don't do the speech, Vincent. I know the speech. You taught it to other people. I watched. Just tell me what you want. A longer pause. When he spoke again, this cable tension in his voice had been replaced by something flatter and more dangerous. Come back, he said. No. Come home, bring the drive, and we sit down like adults, and we negotiate this. The corporate action gets reversed. Damien can walk it back. It's not finalized. And whatever federal arrangement you've made, we deal with that separately. But you come home. And if I don't? Then what happens to Vivian is not something I'll be able to control. Elena's hand was tight on the phone again. She loosened it. She breathed. That's the threat? She said. You're going to hurt Vivian. I'm going to lose the ability to protect her, Vincent said. And it was exactly the kind of language he used, always. The passive construction, the removal of himself from the verb, the action happening in some grammatical space where his hands were not on it. I can't be responsible for every possible outcome when my own family is being... She is not your family. She has never been your family. Elena, you pre-drafted divorce papers while I was painting the nursery, she said. You arranged to have me declared psychologically unfit. You told 4 of your capos I was going to have an accident after the baby was born. Do not talk to me about family. Silence. The blank psychological evaluation form, she said. Was that Bianca's idea or yours? More silence. And in it she heard something she had not expected, not the recalibration she'd heard before, not the adjustment of a man shifting tactical approach. Something rawer. Something that might have been, in another kind of man, in another kind of life, shame. It wasn't supposed to go this far, he said. But it did. Elena, you put 2 men outside Damien's building to frighten him. You sent Reyes to track my location through a federal county. You had someone in the Stamford field office compromised in, 48 hours? And now you have Vivian. She paused. And you're telling me it wasn't supposed to go this far. I'm telling you I can stop it, he said, right now, if you come home. She looked at Knox. He had the car moving slowly out of the parking lot, onto the road, north, away. His phone was in his hand and he was sending a text one-handed while he drove, which she would normally have said something about, but she could see from the angle of his wrist that he was not texting with his eyes on the screen. I need proof of life, she said. Put Vivian on the phone. She's not... Put her on the phone, Vincent, or this conversation is over. A pause. Movement sounds. A brief exchange she couldn't parse. And then Vivian's voice, slightly compressed, the way voices sound when a phone is held at arm's length. Elena. Controlled. Vivian in her working voice, the voice that managed things. I'm okay. I'm in... A pause that was too short to be hesitation and too long to be natural. I'm indoors. I'm not hurt. Did they... I'm okay. I'm okay, Elena. The phone was moved. Vincent's voice again. Satisfied? No, Elena said. But it's enough. She breathed. I need 4 hours. For what? To get to you. I'm not in the city, Vincent. If you want me there, you need to give me time to get there. A pause that she used to read him. The pause of a man deciding how much of what she'd just said he believed, running the math of it against everything he knew about her, which was a great deal, and was also, she was counting on, not quite complete. 4 hours, he said. Yes. The penthouse. Fine. No federal... I'll come alone, she said. 4 hours. She ended the call. Looked at Knox. Drive, she said. He was already driving. What are you doing? He said. Not going to the penthouse. Then what? Buying time. She was already on the encrypted phone dialing Fen. Vivian is somewhere she was moved to before 6 a.m. That means he had her before the smooth-voiced man called me. He had her before the 20-minute window, which means, Fen answered. He has my sister, Elena said. Vivian Hart. She vacated the safe hotel before 6 this morning, likely under some form of coercion. I need every camera in a 2-block radius of the hotel pulled. I need... Elena. Fen's voice was tight. I know. She stopped. What do you mean you know? A pause that lasted long enough to have shape. We had eyes on the hotel, Fen said carefully. Routine surveillance. We saw Vivian Hart leave voluntarily at 5:53 a.m., accompanied by who? Another pause. Marco DeLuca, Fenn said. Knox's hands tightened on the wheel. Elena sat in the back seat of a moving car in January in northern Connecticut and felt something move through her that she did not have an exact name for. Not the hot shock of pure betrayal, not the cold precision of analysis, but something in the compound space between them. The specific sensation of a thing you had been refusing to believe for 36 hours, finally becoming undeniable. Marco DeLuca, who had called her on a prepaid phone and told her about the box and the address and the Delaware holding company. Marco DeLuca, whose phone had gone dark. Marco DeLuca, who had then called Knox, who was in this car, who had been beside her through every location they'd moved to. "Fenn," she said, and her voice came out differently than she expected. Not controlled, not steady, but low and tight, the voice of someone speaking from directly behind a very thin line. "When you say voluntarily..." She walked out under her own power. She did not appear to be restrained. She got into a vehicle with Marco DeLuca at 5:54. A pause. "Elena, I don't know what arrangement was made. We're trying to locate the vehicle now, but the optics of this..." "The optics," Elena said. "It's possible Marco DeLuca made contact with your sister independently. It's possible he offered her..." "Stop!" Elena's voice came out sharp, sharper than she intended, and she stopped and breathed once. "Stop. You're telling me my sister got into a car with Marco DeLuca at 5:54 in the morning after he went dark?" "Yes." "Did she appear to be in distress?" A very long pause. "No," Fenn said. "She did not." The bare trees moved past the windows. The gray sky held. Knox was driving, and he was not saying anything, and Elena understood that he was giving her the specific silence that some information requires. The space to let a thing become real before you have to do anything about it. Her sister had left voluntarily with Marco DeLuca. Her sister, who knew the risk of Marco, who had heard Elena on the phone with him and written begin on a legal pad, who had sat across from federal investigators and built the financial case with the meticulous precision of someone who understood exactly what was at stake, who had told Elena "I'm okay" in the too short, too long voice of someone choosing their words because they were not alone and they did not want the wrong person to hear the wrong thing, or the voice of someone who was not a prisoner at all, who was somewhere she had chosen to be, who was with someone she had chosen to be with. "Fenn," Elena said. "What did Marco DeLuca offer the federal task force 18 months ago when he stepped back from active family management?" A very careful silence. "That's not..." "Fenn, that's not a conversation I can have on an open line." "Was it a cooperation agreement?" Elena said. "Yes or no?" The silence that followed lasted long enough to be an answer, long enough for Elena to understand that the man who had gone dark, who had given her the box and the address and the 48% stake and then disappeared, had not disappeared because Vincent's people found him. He had disappeared because he was never fully on her side to begin with. Because Marco DeLuca had been Fenn's cooperating witness for 18 months, the witness Fenn had called nearly useless and terrified, and Fenn had inserted him into Elena's situation not to protect her but to accelerate the case, and somewhere in that process Vivian had been... She stopped herself. She did not know about Vivian. She did not know yet what Vivian had done or not done, chosen or not chosen. She was not going to think about it as a fact until it was a fact. What she knew was this. The case was real. The evidence was real. The corporate filings were real. The drive was real. None of that had changed. What had changed was that she had been moved across a board by a federal investigator who had decided Elena's knowledge was more valuable than Elena's full informed consent, and that the people she had trusted to be fully on her side had each been, in their own way, partly on someone else's. All except one. She looked at the back of Knox's head, at his hands on the wheel, 10 and 2, the particular steadiness of them. "Knox," she said. "I heard," he said. "Did you know about Marco?" His hands did not move. His shoulders did not move. He looked at the road. "No," he said. She believed him. She was not certain she should believe him, and she believed him anyway, because she was out of the alternative, and because the baby was pressing against her ribs, and she needed at least one thing in the world that was exactly what it appeared to be. "Then it's just us," she said. "Yes," Knox said. "Okay," she said. She looked at the drive in her hand, the photographs, the account numbers she had memorized, the 48% holding already in motion, the evidence still intact, still real, still enough. She thought about Vincent's voice on the phone. Come home. She thought about the blank psychological evaluation form. She thought about the nursery she had painted in August. She thought about what it meant to be a woman who had been moved across a board by the people who were supposed to be moving her to safety, and to find herself still in possession of the thing that everyone wanted, and to understand that the only person she had ever been able to rely on in the final count was herself. She was not angry. That surprised her, and then it didn't. She had moved through anger somewhere in the last week, and come out the other side of it into something harder and more durable, a quality she did not have a precise name for, but which felt, when she pressed against it, like the specific decision to not be destroyed by the people who were trying to destroy her. Pull over, she said. Knox looked at her in the mirror. Why? I need to think, and I can't do it moving. A pause. Please. He pulled over. A shoulder of road, bare trees on both sides, the sky flat and white above them. He put the car in park and turned the engine off, and turned in his seat and looked at her. She looked back at him. This careful man who had driven her through the dark and brought her soup and told her to sleep when she needed to sleep. I'm going to tell you something, she said, and I need you to just listen, not fix it, not plan, just listen. Hey, he said. She took a breath. The baby turned once, slowly, and settled. I don't know if my sister betrayed me, she said. I don't know if Marco was running me from the beginning. I don't know how much of the last week was engineered by people who decided that what I knew was more important than who I was. She stopped, breathed. And I can't know any of that right now. I can't know it, and I can't fix it, and I can't fall apart because of it. Because if I fall apart, then everything I've built in the last 5 days falls apart with me, and that, she stopped again, harder this time. That cannot happen. It cannot happen because this child is coming in 10 weeks, and I need the world it comes into to be different than the world I'm standing in right now. Knox was watching her, not with the trained attention she had cataloged before, not with professional assessment, with the specific kind of attention that a person gives to something they are witnessing rather than managing. Are you done? He said. Yes. Okay, he said. He turned back to the wheel. Put the car in drive. Then here's what we do. She sat up. Her back ached and her hands were cold, and she was 26 weeks pregnant in a car on the shoulder of a Connecticut road in January, with the encrypted drive in her lap, and a husband who had given her 4 hours and a sister whose choices she did not yet understand, and she listened. Knox told her what they were going to do, and she realized, as he spoke, that the plan was not built around protecting her or preserving her or moving her to a safer position on the board. It was built around letting her win. Knox's plan had 3 parts, which he laid out in the kind of language that had no decoration in it. No qualifications, no hedging, just sequenced information delivered in order of operational priority. First, they were not going to the penthouse. Second, Elena was going to release the first package of evidence. Not everything, not the full dossier, but the most combustible piece of it, the documentation of the 2 sitting federal judges, routed anonymously through a journalist contact that Fenn had mentioned in passing 3 days ago, and that Knox had apparently filed away with the same automatic precision he applied to everything. Third, Vincent was going to find out about the release before the 4 hours were up, and the resulting panic inside his organization was going to force movement, people breaking cover, phones activating, vehicles relocating, and that movement was going to show them where Vivian was. How do you know he'll break cover? Elena said. Because the judges are the piece he can't survive losing, Knox said. The money can be restructured, the shell companies can be dissolved and rebuilt, politicians can be managed, but if those 2 judges go down, every case they've touched in 15 years becomes reviewable, and half of Vincent's people who are currently free are suddenly very not free. That's not a financial problem, that's an existential one. She thought about it. He'll think it's already over, that I'm releasing everything regardless of what he does with Vivian. Yes. So the leverage he thinks he has disappears. Yes. Which means Vivian's value to him collapses. Knox looked at her steadily. Either he releases her because holding her is now only a liability, or he stopped. Say it. Or he escalates, tries to use her to force an immediate response before the rest of the package can go out. Elena's hands were flat on the drive in her lap. What's the probability split? I don't know. I know the man through Marco's description and one intelligence profile from 4 years ago. I don't know him the way you know him. She thought about Vincent at the window table at La Marais, pouring wine. She thought about Vincent in the bedroom doorway the morning after she'd placed the earring on his nightstand, looking at her with that flat, measuring attention. She thought about his voice on the phone. It wasn't supposed to go this far. He escalates, she said. He won't release her first. It's not how he operates. When the pressure increases, he applies counterpressure. It's reflexive. Knox absorbed this. Then we need to be ready to move the moment the package goes out. Where? I have 2 possible locations where he'd hold someone on short notice in the city. Former Romano properties. One sold 3 years ago, one technically still in the family's portfolio. Both came up in Marco's original briefing. He paused. I don't know which one is real. We'd have to split and check both. Split. Yes. She looked at him. There are 2 of us. Yes. You're going to send me to check a location alone. No. His voice was flat and final. I go to both. You go to neither. Knox, you're 26 weeks pregnant, and you are the person everyone in this situation is trying to reach. You are not going anywhere near a location where Vincent's people might be holding someone. He said it the way he said everything. No anger, no apology, just the physics of the situation delivered in plain language. You go somewhere with a locked door and a phone and you wait. She opened her mouth. Elena. He looked at her. Pick the fight that matters. She closed her mouth, breathed. Fine, she said. Where's the locked room? Hotel. The locked room turned out to be a diner in Waterbury, 40 minutes south, the kind of place that had been open since 1962, and showed it. Orange vinyl booths, laminated menus, a counter with 8 stools and a coffee machine that looked like it had survived multiple generations of ownership. Knox chose it because it had a back booth with sight lines to both the front entrance and the kitchen corridor, because the parking lot had 2 exits, and because a pregnant woman sitting alone in a diner on a January morning was precisely unremarkable. He ordered her eggs before he left. She didn't argue. He left at 10:47. At 11:03, from the encrypted phone, she transmitted the first evidence package to the journalist. Not through direct contact, through a dead-drop protocol that Knox had established in the car, a specific method involving a cloud storage address that Fenn had used for interagency document transfer, and that Knox had, without elaborating on how, maintained access to. The package arrived. 12 minutes later, the journalist's public email autoresponder went inactive, which Knox had told her was the signal that a human had taken control of the account. She ate the eggs. They were too salty, and she ate them anyway because Knox had been right about eating being non-negotiable, and she was tired of arguing about things that were factually correct. At 11:31, her personal cell rang. Vincent. Not the smooth-voiced intermediary. Vincent directly, from his personal number, calling her cell, which meant he had stopped caring about what could be traced. She answered. What did you send? He said. Not hello, not her name, just the question, stripped of everything except the raw center of what was happening. You know what I sent, she said. Which piece? The piece that removes the possibility of you walking away from this cleanly. You know which piece, Vincent. She heard him breathe, heard something behind him, movement, voices, the muffled urgency of a room that was not calm. You just made things very difficult for 2 men who have done nothing to you personally, he said. They took money from a crime family in exchange for favorable rulings. That's not neutral. That's not nothing. They have families. So do the people who went to prison because of those rulings, she said. Don't. Silence. The movement behind him intensified and then muffled, as if he'd moved to a different room. She heard a door close. What do you want? He said. Flat. The speech was gone. The pressure construction was gone. Just the words, which were the most honest things she had heard from him in years. I want my sister. She's... Now, Vincent, I want her now. I want confirmation she's physically unharmed, and I want her somewhere I can reach her within the next 2 hours. A pause. And then? And then nothing. We don't negotiate. We don't sit down. The corporate action proceeds, the federal case proceeds, and you get what you've built toward. She paused. You want to know if I'll stop releasing evidence if you give me Vivian. Will you? No. She said it without hesitation, without gentleness, without the particular softening she had spent 12 years applying to things that needed to be said plainly. No, Vincent. The evidence goes out on a timeline that I've already set and that I cannot recall. Vivian is not a negotiating chip. She never was. You holding her only makes everything worse for you and nothing better. A long silence. You planned all of this, he said. Not an accusation. Something closer to observation. The tone of a man standing back from a structure and seeing for the first time how it was built. Yes. Before Christmas. The planning started on Christmas Eve, she said. In your town car. With a silk scarf. The silence that followed lasted long enough that she thought he might hang up. I'll send you an address, he said. He hung up. Knox called 4 minutes later. First location is empty, he said. His voice was slightly compressed, slightly fast. Not panicked, but moving. Cleared and recently, there's heat still in the building. Someone was there within the last 3 hours. Vincent's going to send me an address, she said. When? He just agreed to release her. A pause. You believe him? Not entirely, but I think he's done. The judge documents hit. I know, I'm monitoring the journalist's account through Fenn's contact. It's moving fast. 2 wire services have already pinged the story. His voice changed slightly. Elena, if Vincent's sending an address, his people are already trying to triangulate where you are. How long have you been on the personal cell? Less than 4 minutes total. End that call immediately if it's still active, and I need you to move from your current location. You told me to stay. That was before he started calling your personal cell directly. Move. Go somewhere within walking distance with more foot traffic. His voice was still controlled, but there was something underneath it, a compression. I'm 2 minutes from the second location. I'll call when I clear it. He hung up. She left cash on the table, too much, she didn't have time to sort it, and pulled on her coat and walked to the back exit, through the kitchen corridor where a man in a white apron looked at her briefly and said nothing, out into the cold of a Waterbury January. The address arrived by text to her personal phone 40 seconds later. An intersection in Lower Manhattan, a building number she didn't recognize. She forwarded it to Knox's encrypted line and kept walking, head down, toward the Walgreens she had seen half a block from the diner's parking lot. She was 20 feet from the door when the black SUV came around the corner. It came too fast for the street. Not speeding, just moving with the specific purpose of a vehicle that is not navigating traffic but targeting a point. She saw it, and her body processed it before her mind did, the way the body learns threat faster than thought, and she was already moving left toward the recessed doorway of a closed insurance office when the SUV stopped and the passenger door opened. Reyes got out. He was alone from the vehicle. He stood on the sidewalk 15 feet from her, and he did not reach for anything, and he did not raise his voice. He just stood there, in his black coat, with his hands visible and open, which was its own kind of message. I'm not here to do it on the street, not in January in Waterbury in front of a Walgreens. He wants to talk, Reyes said. He just talked, she said. He has a phone. In person. Reyes's face was what it always was. The particular blankness of a man who had trained himself to have no readable surface. He's at the address he sent you. He's there himself. She looked at Reyes. She thought about the diner, about Knox 2 minutes from the second location, about the journalist and the wire services, and the thing that was already in motion and that no one in this street could stop. Vivian, she said, she's there. Is she hurt? No. She looked at him for a long moment. She was cold, and her back had been aching since Torrington, and she was standing in a recessed doorway in Waterbury in January with Reyes between her and the Walgreens and the SUV idling behind him. She took out the encrypted phone and sent Knox the word moving and the name Reyes, and then she put the phone in her coat pocket and walked toward the SUV. It was 47 minutes to Lower Manhattan. She sat in the back seat behind tinted windows and watched Connecticut become New York, and thought about nothing in particular, which was a discipline she had developed over the past week. The ability to enter a waiting state that was not passive but was not yet active, a held breath between preparation and the thing that required it. Reyes drove and said nothing. There was one other man in the front passenger seat, someone she didn't recognize who also said nothing. The radio was off. The heat in the car was too high, and she didn't ask them to turn it down. At the 30-minute mark, her back pain sharpened, a specific, insistent ache across the lower left that she had been managing since Torrington, and that was now moving from manageable to demanding. She shifted, pressed her hand to her side, breathed through it. The baby moved. Not the slow rolling of the past few days, faster, a series of short, distinct movements that she read as agitation, as response to adrenaline in her system, as the body inside her body registering something. "I know," she said quietly, just above a breath. "I know. Almost done." Reyes glanced in the mirror, said nothing. The building Vincent had sent her to was not what she expected. She had expected the penthouse, or one of the family's known properties, something that carried the Romano name and weight. Instead, it was a warehouse building in Tribeca that had been partially converted to loft space, one of the legitimate investments, she realized, one of the Harborview properties, a building she had seen on documents but never visited. The ground floor was empty. They took her to the third floor by freight elevator, Reyes and the other man flanking her without touching her, and the doors opened into a gutted loft space that was large and cold and lit by the industrial fixtures that the conversion had left in place. Vincent was standing at the far end, not pacing, standing still, which was what he did when he was managing himself hardest. He was in a suit, not the charcoal one from Christmas, a darker one, and he looked from 40 feet away like what he was, a man who had not slept and was not going to admit it. Bianca Moretti was beside him, and Vivian was sitting in a chair near the windows, not restrained, no visible restraint, sitting with her spine very straight and her hands in her lap, and when she saw Elena, her face changed. Elena looked at her sister, looked at her face, read it. Vivian was not hurt, she was not frightened, or she was not frightened in the way a prisoner is frightened. She was frightened in the way a person is frightened when the thing they have done becomes visible to the person they love. Elena had time to process that. Exactly enough time. The 3 seconds it took to cross from the elevator to a point 20 feet into the room. And then she set it aside, put it in the same place she had put everything else she could not deal with yet, and looked at Vincent. "You came," he said. "I said I would." He looked at her. All the way at her, the way he used to look at her in the early years, when looking at her had been the point rather than an ancillary detail. "You look exhausted," he said. "You have my sister in a chair in a warehouse," she said. "Let's not do the concern." Something moved across his face. He glanced at Reyes, a gesture she read instantly, and Reyes said something to the other man, and they both moved back toward the elevator, and the elevator doors closed. Just the 4 of them. "Let Vivian go," Elena said. "She can wait downstairs. When we've talked, we can talk with her downstairs." "When we've talked," he said again, and his voice had recovered some of its texture, not all of it, but enough to recognize. The cable tension from the phone was gone. He had gotten himself in hand in the 47 minutes it had taken her to get here. She looked at Bianca. Bianca looked back at her. The precise, flat gaze that Elena had read for 4 years as professional indifference, and had revised on Christmas Eve, and was now reading as something she had not had a category for before today. The look of a woman who had made a significant number of decisions that she was not going to apologize for, and was also, somewhere underneath the precision, reassessing. "Bianca," Elena said. "Mrs. Romano," Bianca said, evenly, the title landing in the space with its full irony intact. "Are you here as his consigliere or his—" She stopped. Chose the word with clinical precision. "Partner." A beat. "I'm here as an interested party." "Then you should be interested in this." Elena reached into her coat pocket and took out the encrypted drive, held it between her fingers. "This is everything. Not the piece I released this morning. Everything. Account numbers, shell structures, political payments, correspondence. Enough for RICO charges, enough for conspiracy, enough for the kind of federal sentencing that begins with life and negotiates downward from there." She watched Bianca's eyes move to the drive. "The release schedule is automated," Elena said. "It goes out in packages over the next 72 hours, regardless of whether I interact with it or not. The only way to stop it was to reach me in the first 4 hours after I said it, and that window closed." She glanced at her watch. 22 minutes ago. Silence in the loft. You're bluffing, Vincent said. I've had 6 days and access to your entire financial architecture and a federal task force investigator and a forensic accountant, she said. When exactly would I have needed to bluff? He was quiet. I'm telling you both, Elena said, because you both need to make a decision right now, in this room, about what comes next. And what comes next for you, Bianca, depends entirely on which side of this you're standing on when the second package goes out tonight. Bianca's expression did not change, but something shifted behind her eyes. A recalculation running. Elena could see it the way you can see someone doing arithmetic, the slight internal movement of assessment. What are you offering? Bianca said. Bianca. Vincent's voice was flat and warning. What are you offering her? Bianca said again. To Elena, not to Vincent. And in that redirect, Elena saw it. The thing she had suspected since the warehouse floor, since looking at Bianca's face when she walked in. The seam. The specific crack in a structure that looks solid until you press the right point. Bianca was not stupid. Bianca had built her entire existence on accurately reading which way the weight was falling, and the weight, right now, was unmistakable. Cooperation with the federal case, Elena said. Your testimony on the operational structure in exchange for a negotiated charge and reduced exposure. It's not immunity. I can't offer immunity. I don't have that authority. But I have Patricia Fenn's direct line, and I have, currently, more of her attention than anyone else in this situation. I will make the call. Bianca. Vincent's voice had changed. Not warning anymore, something sharper. Don't. Bianca looked at him, and Elena watched, in the particular silence that followed, the ending of something between them. Not dramatic, not loud, just the quiet collapse of a structure that had been load-bearing and was no longer. Bianca looked at Vincent Romano with the flat, precise gaze she had always had, and in it now was not indifference but the specific clarity of a person who has finished calculating and reached a number. She looked back at Elena. Make the call, she said. Bianca. It's over, Vincent. Bianca's voice had not raised and had not softened and did not change register in any detectable way. It has been over since Christmas. You just… She stopped. Something passed across her face that was not quite regret, but was in the same neighborhood. You just didn't want to see it. The room went very quiet. Vincent looked at Bianca. He looked at her the way people look at the place where something used to be. A full, specific look, the kind that is doing something more than seeing. Then he looked at Elena. You did all of this, he said. 6 months pregnant. You did all of this. Yes. Why didn't you just leave? He said. And it was, she thought, the most honest question he had ever asked her, stripped of everything, just the raw confusion of a man who had assumed his walls were impenetrable and was now standing inside the rubble of them. You could have taken money, taken a lawyer, left. Why this? She looked at him. Because you were going to have me declared unfit, she said. Because you had moved $9 million while I was painting the nursery. Because 4 of your capos were told I was going to have an accident. She paused. Because leaving without doing this would have meant you got to keep the empire and the story, and I was not willing to hand you both. He was quiet for a long time. Then he sat down. Just sat down on the concrete floor of the warehouse loft, which was so unlike anything she had ever seen him do that it took her a moment to process it. He put his elbows on his knees and his hands on the back of his head, and he sat there. Vivian, Elena said, without taking her eyes off Vincent. Come here. Vivian stood, crossed the room to Elena. They were side by side, and Elena could feel her sister's breathing, slightly elevated, controlled, and she could feel the specific quality of Vivian's proximity, which had its own texture separate from any other person's. The particular warmth of someone who has been in your life long enough to be atmospheric. Are you hurt? Elena said quietly. No, Vivian said. We'll talk later. I know. Are you ready to leave? A pause. Yes. Elena took out the encrypted phone and called Knox. He answered immediately. I'm outside, south entrance. We're coming down, she said. I need you to call Fenn, now. Tell her Bianca Moretti is ready to cooperate, and we're holding position inside the building for the next 20 minutes. A beat. Vivian? She's with me. She's fine. She paused. Knox, call Fenn. She hung up. She looked at Bianca. Go to the window. Use your phone. Call your attorney first, then call the number I'm about to give you. She read Fenn's number aloud. Bianca looked at it, and she could see the woman running one final calculation, the last one, the one that would determine whether the next decade of her life was spent cooperating or not. And then Bianca took out her phone. She looked at Vincent. He was still sitting on the floor. He had not moved. He was looking at the concrete between his feet with the expression of a man who has run out of moves and is sitting in the stillness that comes after. She should have felt something. She was aware that the situation called for something, satisfaction, or grief, or the specific emotional signature of 12 years ending. She waited for it. What she felt instead was the baby move again. 3 quick, distinct kicks, the clearest and most insistent she had felt all week, and she put her hand flat on her stomach and stood there in the Tribeca warehouse with her husband on the floor and her sister beside her, and Bianca Moretti making the call that would take the rest of the structure down. And she felt, beneath the exhaustion and the cold and the persistent ache in her lower back, something that was not triumph and was not relief, but was somewhere between them. Something like the end of a very long-held breath. "Vincent," she said. He looked up. His face was tired. Just tired. The armor was gone, the weight was gone, the specific pressure of him that had filled rooms for 20 years was gone, and what was left underneath was a tired man in a good suit sitting on a concrete floor. She reached into her coat pocket. She had carried it there for 4 days. Printed before she left the penthouse, folded once, the paper soft now from handling. She set the divorce papers on the floor in front of him. He looked down at them. "You had pre-drafted ones in the box," she said. "Those were designed by your lawyer to minimize my position. These are different." She paused. "These are fair, or as close to fair as the situation allows. They were drafted by Damien, who knows the Romano family's holdings better than anyone, and who has spent the last week actively trying to make them equitable." Another pause. "You should sign them. Today, if possible. Your attorney can review whoever you find, but the terms are what they are and they're not going to improve." He looked at the papers. He looked at them for a long time. She waited because she had spent 12 years learning how to wait in rooms with Vincent Romano, and because for the first time in those 12 years, the waiting had weight on her side. "Elena," he said. "Don't," she said quietly. "Whatever you're about to say, don't." He closed his mouth. She straightened, looked at Bianca, who was still at the window, still on the phone, her voice low and precise. Looked at Vivian, who was standing at her shoulder with her jaw set and her eyes wet in the way that Vivian's eyes got when she was holding something together by effort alone. "Come on," Elena said to her sister. They walked to the freight elevator. Elena pressed the button. The doors opened with a mechanical groan that echoed through the high, empty space of the loft. She did not look back. Vivian pressed the lobby button. The doors started to close. Through the narrowing gap, she saw Vincent Romano still sitting on the floor, the divorce papers in front of him, his hands hanging between his knees. And beside him, watching her go, Bianca Moretti stood at the window with her phone pressed to her ear and her face in the gray January light completely still, making the call that was going to dismantle everything. The doors closed. The elevator began to descend. Elena leaned her back against the metal wall and closed her eyes and put both hands on her stomach and felt the baby, quiet now, settled, present. Vivian put her hand over Elena's. They went down in silence, the two of them, through the dark interior of the building, toward the ground, toward Knox, toward the cold outside air and whatever waited in it, while above them the last structure of the Romano Empire began its final, irreversible collapse. Knox was waiting at the south entrance with the car running. He looked at Elena when she came through the door, then at Vivian beside her, then back at Elena, and his face did the thing it did when he was processing multiple variables simultaneously. Very still, very fast, the assessment done, and filed in the time it took them to cross from the door to the car. "Bianca is upstairs making the call," Elena said. "Fenn's already moving. She had a team staged 2 blocks out." He opened the rear door for them. "Vincent?" "He's upstairs." "Alone?" "With Bianca. Reyes is in the building somewhere." She got in. Vivian got in. Knox got in the front and put the car in drive. "He's not going to run." "You're sure?" She thought about Vincent on the floor, the divorce papers in front of him, the specific quality of a man who has stopped. "I'm sure," she said. Knox pulled into the Tribeca Street, into the ordinary January traffic of a Wednesday morning in lower Manhattan, and for a moment all of it, the warehouse, the empty loft, Bianca at the window, Vincent on the floor, receded into the middle distance, the way things do when a car starts moving, became part of the city's enormous, indifferent background. Elena looked out the window. Her back was aching in a new way now, lower and more insistent than the chronic ache of the past week. She pressed her hand against it and breathed. "Hospital," Knox said. Not a question. "Not yet." "Elena, not yet," she said. 20 minutes. I need 20 minutes." He drove. The 20 minutes were for Vivian. Knox pulled into a parking garage on Hudson Street and stopped on the second level, engine idling, and got out without being asked and stood at the hood of the car with his back to them, which was the most tactful thing Elena had ever seen him do. Vivian and Elena sat in the back seat. Neither of them spoke for a while. The garage was dim and smelled like exhaust and concrete, and outside the open levels they could see a strip of gray sky and hear the city moving below them. "Tell me," Elena said finally. Vivian's hands were in her lap. She was looking at them. "I met Marco 2 months ago." Elena was quiet. "Fen introduced us," Vivian said. Or Fen facilitated the introduction. She didn't frame it that way. She said she had a source inside the Romano family who was looking for a financial forensics contact, someone who could help build the evidentiary structure for a cooperation agreement. 2 months ago, Elena said, before Christmas. "Yes." "Before I knew anything." "Yes." Vivian's voice was steady, but the steadiness was costing her. Elena could hear the specific effort in it, the kind that comes from having rehearsed something and then finding that rehearsal doesn't cover the actual moment. "I didn't know what it was going to become. When I met Marco, I thought it was a professional contact for a case I wasn't personally involved in. He was—" She stopped. "He was careful about how he framed it. He didn't tell me about you, not at first." "When did he tell you about me?" A pause. "December 15th. 3 days before Elena had found the reservation confirmation on Vincent's phone. 9 days before Christmas Eve." "And you didn't call me," Elena said. "No." "Why?" Vivian looked up from her hands. Her eyes were red at the edges in the way they got when she had been holding something for a long time. Not crying, just carrying it. "Because Fen said that if you found out through me, the way you'd find out would affect whether you cooperated voluntarily or whether you felt managed into it. She said—" Vivian stopped. "She said it was better if you came to it yourself." Elena sat with that. Sat with December 15th, with Vivian knowing while Elena was decorating Christmas trees and cooking dinners and lying in the dark with her eyes open and not yet understanding. "You were already building the financial case," Elena said, "before I called you on Christmas morning." "Yes." "The framework Damien used for the corporate filings, the mapping of the subsidiary structure. I had started the groundwork." Vivian's voice was very quiet. "I want you to know that I would have told you. If you hadn't called me on Christmas, I was going to call you that week, I had decided." "But you didn't call." "No, you called me first." Elena looked at the strip of gray sky through the garage opening. The city moved below it, indifferent and enormous, doing what the city did regardless of what happened in warehouses and safe houses and hotel rooms and the back seats of parked cars. "The hotel this morning," Elena said. "You left voluntarily." "Marco called me at 4 a.m. He said the Stamford contact had given up enough of the county that the hotel was a risk, and that he had a safer location." A pause. "I trusted him. I trusted him because Fen had vouched for him, and because everything he'd done up until that point had been— he'd been trying to protect both of us. By going dark. By removing himself as a visible connection between us. If Vincent traced the calls to Marco, and through Marco to us, the whole thing collapsed. Going dark was—" She stopped. "Marco made choices that were complicated. Some of them I understood, and some I didn't. But he got me out of that hotel before Reyes could reach you first," Elena said. "Yes." Silence. "Was he in the building?" Elena asked. "The warehouse." "No, he dropped me 3 blocks away. He said going inside would compromise the cooperation agreement. There were terms about direct contact with Vincent's operations." Vivian looked at her. "He said to tell you he was sorry for the way it looked." Elena thought about Marco's voice on the prepaid phone. The 9-year-old daughter. Get out and don't look back. The particular weight of a man delivering the truest thing he was going to say in that conversation, which had been, she now understood, the truest thing he could say within the constraints he was operating under, which were not simple and had not been, from the very beginning. I'm not angry at him, she said. I was angry this morning. I'm not now. Vivian was quiet. I'm not angry at you either, Elena said. Vivian's breath came out slightly unsteady, just slightly. You should be. Probably. Elena looked at her sister, at the red-edged eyes, the careful jaw, the hands that were still holding themselves very still in her lap. But I understand the position you were in. And I understand that every person in this thing was operating with partial information and divided loyalty, including Fen and including Marco and including you. She paused. And I understand that the outcome, the evidence, the filings, the cooperation agreement, none of that happens without the particular way you were already positioned in it, even if I didn't know. That doesn't make it clean, Vivian said. No, Elena agreed. It doesn't. They sat in the garage for another moment. The engine idled. Outside, Knox stood at the hood of the car with his hands in his coat pockets, watching the entrance ramp. He's different, Vivian said. Elena glanced toward Knox. Yes. Different how? I'm not sure yet, Elena said. And then, because she and Vivian had been doing this since they were children, the half-said thing, the one that named something neither of them was fully ready to look at directly. He came when he didn't have to, multiple times. That means something. What it means exactly, I don't know. Vivian looked at her for a long moment. Then she said very quietly, Good. Elena looked at her back. Good, Vivian said again, and there was in it something that was not sentiment and was not simple. Just the specific emphasis of a person who has been watching someone she loves survive something and wants, badly, for the survival to be followed by something worth surviving for. Elena's back pain sharpened. She pressed her hand against it and breathed, and the breath came out longer than she intended. Knox turned around. Hospital, he said, from 15 feet away, with his back turned somehow. Yes, Elena said. Okay, now. The contractions were not what she had expected. She had read about them, had been to the classes, had listened to the clinical descriptions and the anecdotal ones, and had assembled in her mind a concept of what they would feel like. And the actual thing was different. Not more painful exactly, but more total, a full-body event that left no compartment uninvolved. She had spent the past week putting things in compartments, and labor, she discovered, was the systematic dismantling of all of them. Knox got her to the hospital in 11 minutes, which, considering midday Manhattan traffic, was something she filed away as further evidence of his particular set of skills. He pulled to the emergency entrance and was out of the car and around to her door before she had finished registering that they had stopped. I'm fine, she said. You're in labor, he said. I'm 28 weeks. 26. It's... She stopped because another contraction moved through her, and for a moment there was nothing else. Just that. Just the total insistent physical fact of it. When it passed, she became aware that Knox's hand was under her elbow, and Vivian was on her other side, and she was already moving toward the entrance, and the automatic doors were already opening. The next 3 hours existed in the particular compressed timelessness of medical urgency. Doctors and nurses and the specific, efficient language of a hospital moving quickly, and Elena answering questions between contractions with the same flat precision she had applied to everything for the past week, and Vivian in the chair beside her not leaving, and Knox in the hallway not leaving either, which she knew because every time the door opened she could see him there, standing against the wall in the same position, hands in his coat pockets. The contractions slowed, then stopped. The doctor, a young woman with the manner of someone who had seen every possible combination of circumstances and had organized them into a comprehensive taxonomy, sat beside Elena's bed and explained in careful language that the labor had been what she called a warning, brought on by stress and physical exertion and inadequate rest over a sustained period, and that the baby had not descended and the cervix had not progressed, and that with monitoring and rest and genuine stillness, the pregnancy could continue. How long do you need her still? Vivian asked from the chair. Days, the doctor said. Minimum. Ideally, a week. She'll be still, Vivian said. Elena looked at her sister. Sister, I can speak for... She'll be still, Vivian said again to the doctor, who nodded and left. Elena lay back against the hospital pillow. The room smelled like antiseptic, and the particular sterilized neutrality of a place that handled everything without belonging to anything, and the monitors beside her registered her heartbeat, and the baby's heartbeat in parallel green lines, synchronized and unsynchronized by turns, two separate rhythms learning to occupy the same space. She was still. Patricia Fenn came on the second day. She came alone, in civilian clothes, a dark coat, no badge visible, and she sat in the chair Vivian had vacated, and she looked at Elena with the direct, unsentimental gaze that had been consistent since the first morning in the Midtown office. Vincent Romano was taken into federal custody at 2:17 p.m. yesterday, she said. The arraignment is this morning. Elena looked at the window. Outside it was gray and cold, and the city was doing what it did. How many charges? She said. RICO, principal. Money laundering, 18 counts. Conspiracy to commit extortion, 7 counts. Bribery of federal officials, 4 counts. Ben paused. 2 sitting judges have already agreed to cooperate in exchange for reduced charges. 3 capos entered preliminary cooperation conversations this morning. Another pause. Bianca Moretti's cooperation agreement was finalized last night. Her testimony on the operational structure is substantial. And Marco, Elena said. Fenn was quiet for a moment. Marco DeLuca has completed his cooperation obligations under the original agreement. He and his daughter have been relocated. I can't tell you where. Elena nodded. I want to tell you something, Fenn said, and her voice shifted slightly. Not softer, but different, the shift of someone stepping partially outside their professional register. What you did in those 6 days, the preparation, the financial architecture, the evidence preservation. I have been building this case for 6 years with resources and institutional authority and a full team, and you did in 6 days what we hadn't done in 6 years. She paused. I managed you. I used the access you provided without being fully transparent about the framework you were inside. I used Marco as a mechanism to accelerate your movement, and I made decisions about your informed consent that were not mine to make. Elena looked at her. I'm not apologizing, Fenn said. I'm telling you I know what I did, and I know that you know, and I'm not going to offer you a version of it that's tidier than what happened. I appreciate that, Elena said. The case is solid. The evidence you preserved is the backbone of it. Whatever I did to get here, what you did is real, and it's going to matter. I know, Elena said. Fenn looked at her for a moment. Then she reached into her coat pocket and put a card on the side table. If you need anything during the federal proceedings, any of it, testimony preparation, security concerns, anything, direct line. She stood, put on her coat, walked to the door. Fenn, Elena said. She stopped. The people who mattered, Elena said. Marco, Damien, even Vivian, in her way. They all had divided loyalties. They were all operating in multiple directions at once. She paused. That's the nature of the world I was inside. Everyone was always partly for someone else. Fenn looked at her. Not Knox, Elena said. Knox wasn't divided. A beat. Something moved across Fenn's face, brief and honest. No, she said. He wasn't. She looked at Elena for one more moment. Take care of yourself, Mrs. Romano. She left. Elena lay back and listened to the monitors and looked at the ceiling and thought about divided loyalty and what its opposite required of a person and what it cost, and whether she had it in her to be someone whose loyalty was not divided, going forward into whatever came next. She thought she might. Damien Cross came on the 4th day. He brought papers, which she had expected, and he sat in the chair and opened his briefcase with the methodical movements of a man who was using procedure to manage everything that procedure could not actually contain, and he walked her through the divorce settlement document page by page. Vincent had signed it, not the pre-drafted version from the safety deposit box, the one Elena had placed on the warehouse floor. He had signed it the same afternoon, according to Damien, within 2 hours of the federal agents arriving at the building. He signed before the arrest, she said. 40 minutes before. His remaining attorney will contest the timing. Argue it was signed under duress, with federal agents staged outside. The argument won't succeed. Damien looked at her over his reading glasses. The terms are binding. The legitimate business holdings transfer to the trust structure we established. The Romano family's lawful enterprises, the restaurant group, the property portfolio, are now yours to manage or dissolve as you choose. Elena looked at the signature page. Vincent's handwriting, which she knew as well as her own, angled slightly forward, the V and the R larger than the letters that followed them. He could have refused, she said. Yes. He signed anyway. Damien was quiet for a moment. He asked me one question when I brought the papers. He asked whether the child would have his name. Elena looked at the window. What did you tell him? She said. I told him that was your decision and not mine to make. Damien looked at her steadily. It still is. She thought about it. About a boy who would grow up knowing his father's name was attached to a federal RICO conviction. About a boy who would grow up in the legitimate businesses that Empire had generated, which would now be clean, which would be something different. About what a name carried and what it cost and what it was worth to carry or to set down. Lucian, she said. The name will be Lucian, she paused. Lucian Hart. Damien wrote it down. She signed the settlement where he indicated each page without hurrying. Her hand was steady. Outside the hospital windows, the January sky had, while she'd been inside, begun very tentatively moving toward something lighter. Not spring, not yet, but the specific quality of winter beginning its slow negotiation with the calendar, the light holding slightly longer each afternoon. When she finished, she set the pen down and looked at the signature pages. Damien, she said, you drove to my apartment before 8 in the morning on the day after Christmas. He closed his briefcase. Yes. You had 15 years of billing history with that family. You had ongoing retainers, ongoing cases. You walked in and handed me 3 photocopied documents and drove away. He was quiet. Why? She said. He looked at the briefcase in his lap, then at her. His face had the tired quality it had carried the morning she'd first seen it across her kitchen table, but there was something else in it now. Lighter, she thought. Not happy, but lighter. Because I looked at those pre-drafted divorce papers, he said, and then I looked at the psychological evaluation form, and I understood, clearly, finally, what kind of man I had been working for. He paused. I have a granddaughter. She's 14 months old. He stood and put on his coat. I want to be able to look at her. He left. Elena lay in the bed and looked at the signed divorce papers on the side table and thought about the people who had been able to look at themselves and the people who hadn't, and the specific, costly, ordinary decisions that separated them. Knox brought her coffee on the 5th day. Decaf. He had somehow learned this without being told, which she noticed and did not comment on. He sat in the chair, which he had not done before, and he held his own coffee, and they sat in the particular quiet of the hospital room, monitors running, city outside, the two of them in the specific proximity of people who have moved through something together and are now on the other side of it. How's the back? He said. Better. They have me on something. Good. He looked at his coffee. You'll be discharged in 2 days. The doctor wants you in a stable environment. Minimal stress. She said that to you? She said it to Vivian. I happened to be in the hallway. Elena almost smiled. You're always in the hallway. He looked up. His eyes, which she had been reading for a week now, held the particular qualities she had identified in the car in Connecticut. Not the trained attention, not the professional assessment, but the version of his attention that was about her specifically, as a person, rather than as a principle to be managed. Where are you going to go? He said. When you're discharged. There's an apartment above the restaurant on Mercer Street. It's part of the settlement. Empty, furnished, central. She paused. Vivian's going to stay with me for a while. The baby's not due for 10 weeks. We'll have time to set things up. He nodded. Knox, she said. He looked at her. You can stop now, she said. The protection arrangement, whatever understanding you had with Marco, whatever obligation you felt, it's resolved. You can go. He was quiet for a moment. I know, he said. So I'm sitting here drinking coffee, he said, and his voice was what it always was, plain without apology or performance. But there was something in it that had not been there in the first days, some quality she was still learning to name. If that's a problem, she looked at him. It's not a problem, she said. They sat in the quiet. The monitors ran their parallel green lines. Outside the window, the sky was the specific color of late January in New York, flat white shading toward blue at the edges, the day wearing toward afternoon. I'm going to need someone to help manage the businesses, she said. The restaurant group especially. I don't know restaurants. I know finances and I know people and I know how to run a household that functions under pressure, but I don't know the operational side of a 7-restaurant group. That's a specific kind of need, Knox said. Yes. You're not asking me about restaurants. No, she said. I'm not. He looked at his coffee. She watched him think, which was different from watching most people think. Compressed, economical, the decision forming in the time it took other people to locate the problem. Okay, he said. Okay. I'll need to know what I'm walking into. I'll tell you everything, she said. That's the only way I know how to do things now. He nodded once, looked at the window. She looked at it too, the two of them in the hospital room with the city outside, and the monitors running and the settlement papers on the side table and the particular quality of a beginning that does not announce itself but is unmistakably present. Vincent Romano was sentenced 8 months later. She did not go to the sentencing. She did not watch it on television. She knew the outcome through Damien, who called her on a Tuesday afternoon while she was in the Mercer Street apartment feeding Lucian, who was 6 weeks old and had the specific focused intensity of very new people encountering the world for the first time. Life in federal prison, Damien said. 4 concurrent RICO counts, the money laundering, the bribery. The Romano crime family had been formally dissolved under federal order 3 months earlier, its criminal operations dismantled, its illegal assets seized and liquidated, its structure, 20 years of carefully built architecture, declared void. 3 capos had received reduced sentences in exchange for testimony. Bianca Moretti had received 7 years under the cooperation agreement, which Fenn had described to Elena as lenient and which Elena had decided she did not have the energy to have feelings about. She thanked Damien and ended the call and looked at Lucian. He was dark-haired and did not look like either of them in particular, which she was choosing to read as characteristic independence rather than ambiguity. He had a quality of attention that reminded her, when she was honest about it, in the middle of the night, in the particular honesty of new parenthood, of Vincent, and she was slowly learning to hold that without it meaning anything catastrophic. A child could inherit a father's quality of attention without inheriting his choices. That was the whole point, she thought. That was the work. She thought about whether she would tell Lucian someday about his father. She thought she would, not to damage him and not to protect him from complexity, but because the truth of a person's origin was their own to know and to make something of. She would tell him when he was old enough for it to be information rather than wound, and she would tell it plainly, and she would let him do with it whatever he needed to do. That was later. She went back to La Marais in April. Not for any particular reason she could have explained cleanly, not closure, which she had always found to be a term that promised more than it delivered, and not sentiment. More like the specific need to occupy a place that had been charged with a particular meaning and to find out if it still had that charge when she arrived in different circumstances. Lucian was with Vivian that afternoon. Vivian had moved into the second bedroom on Mercer Street on a supposedly temporary basis that had gradually solidified into something both of them acknowledged without discussing, the way sisters in proximity to each other tend to do. They had not fully resolved what had happened in December. The managed information, the divided loyalty, the particular way that knowing and not telling can be its own kind of choice, but they were resolving it in the only way Elena had found to work, which was incrementally and through the ordinary accumulation of days lived in honesty. She walked to the restaurant from the apartment. It was 40 minutes, longer than necessary, but she had developed over the past months a habit of walking the city that she had not had before, moving through it on foot, without a car, and a driver, and the specific insulation of the Romano life, just the sidewalk and the cold, and the city's enormous indifferent surface. La Marais was open for lunch. She got a table by the window, which she asked for directly, without apology, and the host gave it to her without comment. She ordered what she wanted and ate it without thinking about what she was supposed to order, which was the kind of small, uncomplicated liberty that had taken her time to stop noticing and might, she thought, take even more time to fully stop appreciating. The view from the window was the Hudson, gray-blue in April, with the New Jersey shore across it and the sky doing the specific thing April skies do in New York, moving, changing, refusing to commit to any single quality of light. She looked at it and thought about Christmas Eve in the snow, about standing on this same block in her pajamas and flat boots with her phone raised, photographing through the glass, about the woman she had been in that moment, not yet planning, not yet decided, just standing in the cold being shown something she could not unsee. She had not been ready that night. She had gone home and lain in the dark and begun, quietly, to become ready. She thought about what it had cost. Not abstractly, concretely, person by person, choice by choice. Damien, who had 15 years of billing history and drove over before 8 in the morning anyway. Marco, who was somewhere she would never know with a daughter who was 10 now. Vivian, who had known in December and was still here, in the second bedroom on Mercer Street, with the kind of presence that does not require resolution to be real. Fen, who had managed her and told her she knew it and left a card. Knox, who had driven through the dark and brought her soup and was now, 3 days a week, learning the operational side of a 7-restaurant group in a way that suggested he was going to be better at it than she had given him credit for. She thought about the men who had stood in Damien's waiting room for 45 minutes, about Reyes at the Walgreens, about the smooth-voiced man on the phone with his 20-minute window. She thought about the warehouse floor and the divorce papers and Vincent's signature on them. She thought about Lucian, 6 weeks old and ferociously present, with his dark hair and his quality of attention. None of it was clean. None of it had resolved into the kind of shape that a story resolves into when it ends. The neat closing, the settled account. She was 35 years old, and she was starting over in the literal sense, building from the legitimate assets of a criminal empire into something that could be what she said it was going to be, which was work that did not require anyone to disappear or be frightened or stand in waiting rooms being threatened without words. That work was going to take years. She knew that. She was not afraid of years. She was afraid, still and honestly, of smaller things. Of the specific loneliness of a Tuesday evening when Vivian was out and the apartment was quiet and Lucian was asleep, and she sat in the kitchen and felt the full weight of what she had walked away from. Not the empire, not Vincent's particular brand of power, but the 12-year-old architecture of a life, however compromised, however built on sand. The familiarity of it. The way that even a bad life, long enough inhabited, leaves behind a shape that absence then has to fill. She was filling it. Slowly, with intention, with the specific materials available to her, the restaurant meetings, the legal consultations with Damien, the walks through the city, Vivian's voice through the bedroom wall, Lucian's weight in her arms, Knox's particular brand of steadiness 3 days a week. And she thought, looking at the Hudson in its April mood, herself. Her own company, which she was learning to find adequate. Not perfect. She had never been interested in perfect, had always found it suspicious. But adequate, present, worth the room. The waiter came to clear her plate and asked if she wanted anything else. She ordered dessert. She ate it slowly, looking at the water. When she was finished, she left a generous tip and put on her coat and walked back out into the April afternoon. The city was doing what it always did, which was moving without reference to any individual life moving through it, its enormous scale indifferent to the specific weight of specific moments. She had spent 12 years finding that indifference oppressive, the city as backdrop to the Romano name, to the requirements of a life lived inside that name. She found it now, something closer to company. She walked north along the waterfront, her hands in her coat pockets, into the particular light of a late April afternoon in Manhattan, the skyline doing its thing to the east, and the river doing its thing to the west, and the city between them moving in all its ordinary, extraordinary motion. Lucian was with Vivian. Knox was at the Mercer Street restaurant, learning something about kitchen logistics from the head chef, with the focused patience he brought to anything that required it. Damien had a filing due this week that she would review on Thursday. There were decisions to be made about the Harborview properties, a board meeting for the restaurant group next month, a call with Fenn's office about testimony scheduling for one of the secondary RICO proceedings. There was a lot of work. There was going to be a lot of work for a long time. She walked north into it, into the ordinary, loud, unremarkable afternoon, and the city held her the way cities hold everyone, indiscriminately, without knowing what they're holding, which was, she had decided,